we have the roll call?
Brian Goss.
Here.
Charles Anito.
Here.
John Byron.
Here.
Vinnie Toronto.
Here.
John Windsor.
Here.
Jerry Castro.
Here.
Stephanie Ely.
Here.
John Durkee.
Here.
Courtney Barker.
Here.
Todd Swingle. Danielle Bowden.
Here.
David Lane and Kenneth Welcome to the excused. We have one.
Thank you. Could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? The Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So motioned?
Second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'll also entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Again, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Virginia.
Good morning. I would like to, you have the written progress reports and fiscal reports. You've got a very full agenda today, so I would like to skip a verbal report with the exception of one MIMS update from Walker.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as of December 4th, the dredging on the MIMS project is complete. They still have some work to do on the dredge material management area. We were able to calculate that approximately 50 tons of nitrogen were removed as a part of the project, as well as 7 tons of nitrogen. So just wanted to give you a heads up. We've still got a ways to go before they will completely decommission the dredge material management area, but the dredging itself is complete, and the boat ramp will likely be open by the end of next week in MIMS.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That brings us to other reports and special presentations.
Madam Chair, first up is our county commissioner, county manager, Frank Abbate.
Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to start by recognizing and expressing my utmost appreciation for the tremendous personal commitments of time, the dedication and efforts that each of you, as well as our natural resources staff and, of course, Virginia, have made to support the Citizens Oversight Committee in its mission to recommend updates to the Save Our Indian River Lagoon project plan to the Board of County Commissioners, as well as serving as public oversight for fostering implementation of less costly and more timely tools and techniques for the restoration of our Indian River Lagoon. I want to take the opportunity to share with you this morning how personally important the Indian River Lagoon restoration is to me. In the early 1990s, I used to enjoy clamming in the Banana River with my father. I cherish those times that we shared using our feet to locate clams, and as you know, those days are gone for at least the last 10 or 15 years. I fished in the river every week for years with my son. His love for the Indian River Lagoon drove him and several of his closest friends to fish competitively, so competitively that they formed a team while they were in middle school and through high school years, and it really has influenced their lives very, very significantly. During that period of time, they also were involved in a variety of community service activities related to the lagoon, because it was that important to all of us. They were involved in monofilament recycling, mangrove restoration, Brazilian pepper tree, and that was during 2002, 2006, 2007. I have 2 daughters. Both those daughters spent a combined 8 years as coxswains for Space Coast crew, enjoying the beauty of all the Indian River Lagoon has had to offer. I can tell you that it's substantially influenced their lives, and that has impacted me very substantially. My son is in the Coast Guard. He's 11 years in there as a coxswain, a search and rescue. One of the other teammates on their team ended up becoming a maritime lawyer. A third one currently is a charter captain down in Hawks Cay. So I could see the connection that the Indian River Lagoon has played in all their lives. Today, I take my grandson fishing in the Banana River multiple times every week, and I mean that, multiple times every week. He's 5 years old. He loves it. I want to see the lagoon restored so future generations can experience all the natural beauty and benefits that the Indian River Lagoon can provide. Simply put, the Indian River Lagoon has been a critically important part of my entire family's lives. When I became the county manager in 2017, I established 5 priorities for our organization to focus on. The first one was inclusiveness, that is being open to listening to what everyone had to say, and then of course us being responsive. A way for us to show, I believe, and it's worked very successfully from my perspective, that you respect others when you respond to them in a very timely manner, and that was and remains a top priority for us as an organization. Road infrastructure, whether it was repaving, what we do with reconstruction, and hopefully in the future addressing capacity issues is the second of those 5 priorities. The third one that we've discussed, and we always discuss, is our Indian River Lagoon and its restoration. Employee development, succession planning, and training is an important one. And finally, the 5th one is employee compensation issues that we have. Ever since that time, back in May of 2017, the consistent and repeated messaging of these priorities is something I'm confident that all our directors and senior leadership can and will attest to. We talk about these priorities either directly or indirectly at our director meetings twice a month. These priorities have become a part of our organizational culture. They are reemphasized at public speaking engagements, and they're shared in other media platforms to get the word out to the public, including the annual county manager's budget message, which just recently came out. In addition to what you see and hear about in these Citizens Oversight Committee meetings, I want to assure you that county staff, and especially our senior leadership team, is unequivocally supportive and fully engaged in supporting lagoon-related restoration and improvement activities. I'm grateful to be able to take a few moments of your valuable time this morning to share some of the types of activities that the County Manager's Office, as well as other departments, are engaged in that are intended to enhance and add to the lagoon cleanup efforts. A comprehensive county and environmental compliance and pollution prevention program was created by administrative order in September of 2015. A countywide pollution prevention team was tasked with, among other things, identifying potential pollution sources, preventing pollution at its source, planning, preparing for spills and accidental releases, and training employees annually on stormwater pollution and spill prevention controls and countermeasures. Key departments that are under this administrative order include natural resources, which takes the lead in it, utilities, solid waste, central services, fire rescue, public works, transit, and risk management. You'll note that it's a representative cross-section of our organization. At this time, after having been in existence for about 3 years now, this administrative order is currently under review by Natural Resources to ensure that it's fine-tuned in a way that helps us meet the important objectives that I've referred to. A countywide septic moratorium ordinance and the ordinance that was subsequently adopted was coordinated with Natural Resources, the county's Planning and Development Department, city managers, city building officials, and the Florida Department of Health in support of the goals of the Save Our Indian River Lagoon program to reduce the impacts of septic systems on the lagoon and its water quality. For North Merritt Island, a small area plan and stormwater model is moving forward with coordination among our Planning and Development Department, Public Works, and Natural Resources Management to improve knowledge and management of stormwater on North Merritt Island. Brevard's petroleum cleanup program has been expanded to 5 counties along the Indian River Lagoon: Brevard, Indian River, St. Lucie, Martin, and Okeechobee. This allows county staff funded by state contract dollars to remediate petroleum and other hazardous waste leaks and spills along most of the length of the Indian River Lagoon. During the last year, the County Manager's Office, Utilities, and Natural Resources have worked collaboratively to discuss sewer-related challenges, including inflow and infiltration issues, wastewater treatment plant issues relating to capacity and reuse water. When red tide approached the East Coast a short while back ago, just a few months ago, the County Manager's Office coordinated with the Florida Fish and Wildlife, Natural Resources, Public Safety, including Fire Rescue, Emergency Management, Parks and Rec, and our Tourism Office, as well as Keep Brevard Beautiful, and other partners to proactively develop plans that were implemented to address red tide issues, including cleanup, benefiting from lessons that we learned during the 2016 fish kill. Emergency management has followed up and developed an Agile Bloom response plan that was implemented this November, establishing plans and procedures that coordinate efforts among appropriate agencies to prepare for, respond to, and recover from the impacts of harmful algal blooms. This information was shared with countywide emergency management coordinators at their quarterly meeting earlier this week, so it's very recent. County Manager's Office staff, myself included, have met repeatedly with Natural Resources staff to coordinate and address PFOA and PFAS issues that have been raised during the last several months, and I believe that staff has responded in a very responsible and appropriate way, remaining sensitive to community concerns on the questions that are associated with those contaminants. Dredge material management areas have been and continue to be another important focus that gets a lot of our attention. Every quarter, I, together with Virginia and Assistant County Manager John Denninghoff, meet with our internal auditors to review what has been going on with the Citizens Oversight Committee and Save Our Indian River Lagoon projects. In addition, every quarterly report that's issued by our Public Information Officer, Don Walker, focuses on lagoon and utility-related projects and undertakings. In terms of responsiveness, I can tell you that I don't let any, and I mean this sincerely, I don't let any contracts or other agreements relating to Indian River Lagoon projects sit on my desk without being reviewed and processed within 2 work days, and typically it's done on the same day that I receive it. I share this information with you this morning to emphasize that both personally and organizationally, we're deeply committed to this critical initiative. We are not involved in a single focal point, but a multifaceted approach to supporting efforts to move the entire family of Indian River Lagoon restoration initiatives forward. In closing, we are grateful to work in close partnership with you to do everything we possibly can to fully restore the lagoon as quickly and as cost-effectively as possible, consistent with the will of the voters. Let me close by once again thanking each one of you for the extremely valuable service that you provide to us as members of the Citizens Oversight Committee. And thanks for this opportunity to speak before you this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Drew Bartlett?
And next up, it's Drew Bartlett and Dr. Ann Shortelle with Water Management District.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us here today. So Ann and I, we go way back, and when we think about our challenges in the state and what we've had to go through over the last few years, Indian River Lagoon always comes to mind as a treasured resource that we need to respond to, protect, restore, and just make as much progress as humanly possible to recover that resource to where we all want it to be. And it's not often we get to forge these partnerships and then celebrate that partnership, and that's what we are here to do today. And that's the poster board for the project itself. Yep. Yep, and so you may have had a handout there. And what this does is there's a canal that goes through that area that tends to pick up all the stuff in that area and deliver it to the lagoon untreated. And so Ann and I and the National Estuary Program and Brevard County and this committee have, talked about that can't happen. That water needs to be captured, treated, and sent where it's supposed to be, which is the St. Johns River, not the Indian River Lagoon. And so capturing an average of 9 million gallons per year, 23,000 pounds of total nitrogen per year, 3,000 pounds of total phosphorus per year, and 90,000 pounds of suspended solids per year, treating it and sending that clean water to St. John's is what this is all about. We know it had to be done, so we're really excited to forge this partnership so that we don't have to dredge this out of the lagoon in the future, right? So I'll turn it over to Ann to give her thoughts too, but we want to do a little picture with the checks and everything. So
Yeah, we have big checks. So thank you for having us here today. I do think it's important, as we're all in this full court press for the good of the Indian River Lagoon and its restoration, to pause periodically and remember and celebrate the projects that are going in the ground and the progress that we're making. That's key, because it took us a long time to get where we are, and it's going to take us a long time to get out of it. We heard a little bit about a dredging project a few minutes ago. We are also working on a dredging project in the Algal River. Some of that legacy load chocked full, that muck's chocked full of nitrogen and phosphorus, you heard that. Some of that in the Algal River is 12 feet deep. So far we've got about 440 cubic yards of muck out. We're still on it, hoping to be done with the dredging this spring. That tributary obviously feeds directly into the lagoon. Another project that I hope you're aware of is the Miko Stormwater Park down at the southern end of the county. Treats a tremendous amount of stormwater, removes large numbers of nitrogen and phosphorus each year, cleaning up that stormwater before it gets to the lagoon. And oh, by the way, it's beautiful out there. It's open for recreation. Please go and enjoy it. It's another tool in the toolbox that's working and beautiful at the same time. But this project is one of my favorites. You heard Drew talk about these cross-cutting canals. That is stormwater, rainwater running off from the watershed, completely untreated into the Indian River Lagoon. And there are many of these canals. This particular one is a very cost-effective project, but it wouldn't be possible without funding from the department, and we thank the department, without your leadership and your funding, which we're celebrating today, and the investment that we're making. We've already invested $1 million to get the design and permitting done, and if we don't hit any big potholes, we'll be in construction later on in 2019 with supported by your investment, their investment, and our investment. And this project will be done in about 2.5 years. So it's exciting. Let's take a moment to celebrate that. And remember, my mom would have said, many hands make light work. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Checks. Your check, and just a photo op.
Back there?
Sure.
We got the little checks.
What?
So we got the little checks.
We need direction.
Yeah, well, we hope so.
do y'all want to join us?
That's very nice of you.
Come on, this is your opportunity to stretch. Come on, let's go.
That's the 2019 budget.
Do you want
Sure, absolutely.
Frank? Frank can squeeze. Squeeze.
Sideways, with a young girl next to us. It's water down.
The first one, I'm just going to do a couple with the phone, then I'll do a couple with the camera. Thank you. And I'll put this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This wouldn't be possible without everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's always fun to get money.
I like money.
All right, while the IT gurus figure out the next step, the M1 project, Dr. Ann Shortelle has really championed that project from the start, along with Drew Bartlett from Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So they have many staff who have worked on making it happen, but both of them have taken a real personal interest in making this project happen, and so we're excited to be a part of it.
When did the idea of that project start? Just out of curiosity.
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
We did a feasibility study in conjunction with the IRLP, co-funded by the department and us, to look at those stormwater opportunities, the big ones.
The big ones.
The big ones, up and down the lagoon. So we've got them lined up. If you're ready, we're ready. But this one seemed like the one to start with. I'm excited about it.
That's great. Thank you all for your
Thank you.
efforts. Appreciate it.
We need a new PC in this room.
That was the other
It's actually
jump drive.
So Dr. James Sullivan is the executive director of Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute at Florida Atlantic University, and I saw that he did a very well-received presentation on harmful algal blooms around the state of Florida, reached out to him with the hope that we could get him on the agenda at some point, and miraculously he made himself available today, and so I'm very grateful for him to be here, and what else can I say?
And hopefully
Yeah.
the computer will cooperate. I don't know if you... It's getting out.
We're close.
I don't know if that's going to
Well,
do
we're
anything.
watching the little green bar move across the top. It's
There we go. Man, this is a slow computer.
We reserve, in the public sector, we reserve our best computers for the diocese, right?
It took all that time. Now it's just going to look for the one file that's on there.
I always get around about that. The worst computer ever in our, I don't know why we do that, because it's the most public.
There it is. I'll throw it on your desktop. Let's switch it. Yeah, gotta go for it. For the best. Oops. Okay, so it's actually up, and I'll, does this actually function?
maybe. We haven't been in this room for 6 months.
All right, it actually functions.
All right.
I don't know if it'll go backwards, but yeah, it does. All right, great. And I've actually got a pointer. Ready to go?
Yes.
All right, as Virginia said, my name is Jim Sullivan. I am the Executive Director of the Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute, and I was asked to come speak to you about harmful algal blooms today, so I hope you find this somewhat educational. What are harmful algal blooms? I think almost everyone should know what they are, but they're just occurrences of phytoplankton, or what we commonly call algae, that cause negative ecosystem or human impacts. And there's some examples right there of what, typically when you see a harmful algal bloom, the water's green, it's red, it's brown. we tend to name them after the color, how it discolors the water. So what are phytoplankton? These are microscopic plants. Like I said, we commonly call them algae, and they also include photosynthetic bacteria. So they're not just, there's a whole wide variety of these organisms. They're pretty small. This is a typical cell called a dinoflagellate that's a harmful algae. This is not playing this video, it should. But these can actually swim. So they're not really just simple plants. They've evolved over millions of years, and they have a lot of adaptations, including producing toxin as one of them. So they can swim, which is how you sometimes see them concentrated on the surface. They're actually swimming up to the surface and sitting there to get sunlight. And they're about 50 microns in size, and if you don't know what that means, the diameter of your hair is about 50 microns. So these are microscopic single-cell plants. Harmful phytoplankton, like all plants, they typically need three main conditions to bloom and grow. Optimal light, where higher light promotes faster growth. Optimal temperature, warmer temperatures make them grow faster almost all the time. And optimal nutrients. And if you have more nutrients, you're going to have more biomass, so you have more of it in the water, which is always an issue. That's when they become a problem. How are they harmful? Almost everyone knows about the toxin part of it. They can produce a wide variety of toxins that have different effects on us and other animals in the ecosystem. Saxitoxin, microcystin, brevetoxin, that's Florida red tide, domoic acid. All these occur in the Indian River Lagoon, all these different toxins. However, they can be dangerous by their high biomass. When you see something like this, when this sinks to the bottom, it can strip all the oxygen out of the water and you get hypoxia or anoxia. That's what happened in 2016 with the brown tide here. It stripped all the oxygen out. You had a massive fish kill. It can also shade seagrass. So if you have all the algae at the surface like this, no light can penetrate to the bottom of the lagoon. And all that seagrass will die, which is another thing we saw during the super bloom and the 2016 brown tide. They can also cause mechanical damage. These cells secrete mucus and surfactants that can actually affect other organisms, like the feeding of shellfish or the other grazers that eat them. They can also have serrations on their cells that will actually cut fish gills. So even though they're not toxic, they can actually kill other organisms by these mechanical mechanisms. And of course, the fourth thing is economics. We all know this. No one's going to come here and do tourism in Florida if the beaches are closed due to red tide. So in Florida, we have right now an ecological and an economic crisis. And these are just some headlines from this year. And this has been going on now for quite a few years. And these are not the headlines any of you want to see. And none of us want to see it as residents of Florida. But this problem is not going away. Worldwide, HABs are increasing not only in the geographical locations of where we've seen them, but in the type, frequency, duration, and severity. So here are reported HAB occurrences from a map of just the US, not worldwide. And this is around 1972. And these different dots and symbols represent different kind of harmful algae blooms. This is now. That's a stunning difference in what's occurring, not just in the amount, but all the different types we're now seeing. And this is especially true for Florida. Florida is one of the most impacted states in the US for harmful algal blooms. I mean, there are so many symbols now of what we have here. It's just obliterating the state. These maps are becoming not so useful anymore. But you're starting to get a sense of just how widespread this problem really is. Why are these things increasing? This is pretty simple. You've already heard it talked about here. People talk about removing nutrients from the lagoon and elsewhere. But eutrophication or nutrient pollution is a big problem. More nutrients, more algae biomass, the more it can grow. A second big thing, which is a lot harder to fix, is global warming and climate change. Whether you believe it's man-made or not, our waters are getting warmer. That's a problem, because warming water increases the range. In other words, organisms that could not grow in the Caribbean or were a problem can now start growing further and further north and get into our lagoon and start growing there, where they couldn't have before. It also increases their growth rates. So when they do get there, they grow faster. And there's more nutrients. Now you get a harmful algal bloom. Also, because of climate change, you see changing precipitation. You get different areas of drought and runoff. And this can help some organisms, hurt others. And they can contribute to what you see with harmful algae. And there's a lot of human ecosystem modifications we do, how we, land use practices, increase runoff, which brings more nutrients. I could talk about that for an hour. But those three things are the main drivers for why we're seeing these changes across the country. The problem is, it's actually forecast to get worse. We think it's bad now. It's probably going to get worse than it actually is. If you just read the National Climate Assessment, which just came out like 2 weeks ago, one headline, they did different areas of the country. The climate change that we're expecting, they're predicting that red tide will become even more common in Florida than it already is. And when they say red tide, they mean everything, not just red tide, which I'll talk about right now. Everyone gets worried about red tide. They talk about it. It's a statewide thing. That is not the only problem we have. Matter of fact, on this coast, it's a minimal problem. These are just some of the main harmful algal blooms that are going on right now. These are things that have occurred in the last year. The big red circles are Karenia brevis, which makes brevetoxin, which is the red tide, which occurred on this coast this year. You probably heard about the cyanobacterial blooms that come out of Lake Okeechobee and go to both coasts during the discharges. This is a massive problem in the southern part of the lagoon. The brown tide up here, stretching down into this area, it's, we hope, non-toxic. That's still going on. That bloom has been going on since 2012. It has not stopped. We could have another fish kill like 2016 anytime if the conditions get right. In the Banana River, there's been a bloom going on every summer since 1997 of pyridinium, which produces an incredibly bad neurotoxin called saxitoxin. We measure very high rates of this toxin in the water. Keep aware of that if you're going out there and fishing. Another organism starting to see in the lagoon, which I worry might become a problem in the future, is this organism called Pseudonychia. It makes a toxin called domoic acid, another really nasty neurotoxin. The microcystis that I talked about that comes from Lake Okeechobee, this makes microcystin. This is a hepatotoxin. It will destroy your liver, and it can kill people and has killed people. Down in the southern part of the state, we have ciguatera. How many people have heard of that? It's fish poisoning. That's getting more common. This is another organism that, with warmer water, we'll start seeing ciguatera make its way up the coast, so it may be a problem here. And lastly, we also had, and similar to the super bloom that happened with cyanobacteria and these other picoplankton in 2011, that's going on in Florida Bay right now. So we have a problem, and we have a lot of it. Now, as you just saw from that, there are many different types of toxins. I mean, each one of them, you can get paralytic poisoning, diuretic poisoning, neurotoxic poisoning, amnesic poisoning, ciguatera fish poisoning. There are a lot of different toxins that might be affecting the populations that are exposed to these waters. And it can get in different ways, through drinking water, through breathing in fumes when you're around it, like the brevetoxin when people went to the beach, started coughing. You can get it through eating contaminated fish, and also just recreational exposure. You're going out on the water during a bloom. You're getting exposed to it, and so are your pets if they're going in the water. And we know a lot about this, the acute impacts, the immediate and really severe impacts you can get, like coughing and your eyes watering during the red tide. What we know very little about are these chronic impacts. What happens to someone that's exposed to these year after year after year? Like people on the West Coast that are now exposed to brevetoxin every summer. What's happening to them? It's a neurotoxin. It can kill. It does kill. We need a lot more research on this stuff because we don't know what the ultimate risk is to the population right now, which is scary. And I'll just give you one example. For every one of those blooms, this same story could probably be told. And I'll just go through this one. This is Lake Okeechobee. We have these really large cyanobacterial blooms of this organism called microcystis. And it's hard to see in the light, but all this green slick you see on the lake, and Lake Okeechobee's big. That's this bloom floating at the surface. It takes, at times, 90% of the lake. This microcystis produces this really bad liver toxin, microcystin, which can destroy your liver, give you liver failure, and it also can cause neurological problems in people. These halves are transported to our coast through C-44 into the St. Lucie estuary in the Indian River Lagoon. And St. Lucie and Martin County declared a state of emergency in 2016. They may have done it again this year, because it was bad again this year. And you'd see signs like this: don't go in the water, don't touch the water. Good for them for putting that up, because people should not go in this water. It's pretty dangerous. The problem is, these blooms, we know they're causing the economic and the environmental problems. That's pretty obvious. There probably is a direct human cost. This is a study that was done, it was published in 2017, I believe, from Ohio State. 4 counties on Florida's Treasure Coast make up a cluster with high rates of deaths from non-alcoholic liver disease and algae blooms. And the 4 counties are Indian River, Martin, St. Lucie, and Okeechobee. You can see them outlined here. Correlation is not causation, but this is a warning to all of us that this is a problem. This could be true for all these other algae blooms with toxins that we're not studying people. We don't know what it's doing to people. And this happened this year down in Martin County. Dogs started getting sick because their owners were letting them go in the water, and they're licking the algae off them, and it was melting their livers essentially and killing them. At least 2 or 3 dogs actually ended up dying this year. So I'll just close with what are we trying to do right now? This is obviously a big problem. Scientists need to get involved. The state needs to be involved. The federal government needs to be involved. We're in crisis mode. I established at Harbor Branch what we call the Florida Center for Coastal and Human Health. And what we are trying to do, and we just started this in August of this year, gathering together all the experts and scientists we have in FAU and partners. So we're reaching out, University of Florida, FIT, different people that we can find who have this kind of expertise, and starting to bring us all together to deal with this crisis in Florida. There's a lot of good people doing research, but we need to work together. We can't all just work separately. So we'll come together and try to do our best, aggregate our research together, and then start to understand what are the health impacts, what are these chronic impacts to people, so at least the public will be informed of what their risk is if they're by the water. And eventually work with politicians and management agencies to get the kind of mitigation or control to stop this, or at least try to get it under control so we can have a healthy environment and a population. And what am I doing right now? I'm recruiting a lot of stakeholders and strategic partners. I want governments, counties, whatever, to work together so we can get information out to them before the public hears it, so we can be prepared. I'm currently working with all these groups to get memorandums of understanding to work under our center. And we're conducting research. Harbor Branch has started one of the only studies in the state that I'm aware of where we're actually testing people now for how much toxins are actually in them when they're recreationally or occupationally exposed to these blooms. We're taking blood, urine, and nasal swab samples. We want to know how much toxins in the people. That's the first step of understanding these chronic problems and what happens. And we're doing a lot. We're working with NASA to track the blooms in Lake Okeechobee. I have a project with a researcher at FIT to look at how the toxins are getting into dolphins in the lagoon, because that's a sentinel species for us. If they're getting sick from it, we probably are too. We're looking at how nutrients are feeding them, and we're doing an observatory down in the southern part of the lagoon. So we're trying to get this research going. We're trying to get all these partners together, and hopefully, we'll be successful in the future. And that's it. If you have any questions, go ahead.
Besides being extremely scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate to scare people, but you know what? It's the reality we live with.
Real scary. So, the Banana River, where I used to fish 4 or 5 times a week, and our county manager's doing it with a 5-year-old right now.
Yep.
The brown's still there. You talked about that. Would it
Both those blooms are going on simultaneously there.
Yeah.
You got 2 different things.
Would it make sense, and this may fall under your department, Virginia, to make that area no-take, catch and release only for those people who are recreational fishing?
So there is already a permanent ban on pufferfish from the Banana River in the northern part of the lagoon because of this problem.
Very few people keep puffers.
I know. But what you're saying
it's trouts and reds.
Might be something to think about, but really what you do before, you don't want to alarm people and scare them. What you do is the research, and we're actually doing it in the Banana River right now, where we take prey fish of dolphins or fish that people might take and actually start assaying them for the amount of toxin in them. You want to know, okay, are they dangerous? Are they dangerous to eat? We don't even have that level of information. There's a lot of this kind of data that everyone thinks, oh, we know everything. We don't know everything.
Do you need volunteer assistance up in that area?
What we need, mostly, science is expensive. We need money. I mean, I hate begging.
My friends were all fishermen. They don't have money, but
right.
they can help.
We can't take a fish and do the toxicity analysis without having the money to actually do it, or we're just going to have a bunch of fish in a freezer. You can't, if you're going to peel a scientist away from what he's funded to do and tell him you have to do this, it's critical. It costs money to do it, and you just have to. You have to have that funding in place. I would love if we did, yes, citizen science, having people tag, where they caught the fish and bring it to us. great. And I would assume we'd start that. And we'll start it under this center, probably with citizens taking water samples, at least. If they see discolored water, they can be our eyes and ears out in the lagoon. Because there's a lot of little harmful algal blooms that occur in the lagoon that never make the news. But they only last for like a week or two.
And they're small and they move.
They're small, and if a citizen sees them, they could take a sample, send it back to Harbor Branch or one of our labs, and we'll look at it and say, okay, now we know that's there. And it'll help us understand what's going on. Science is really expensive, and we can't be all over the lagoon all the time. So it's a problem. It's a big lagoon.
Dr. Sullivan, thanks. That was a great presentation. You had mentioned in your slides kind of how to educate people and get them more on board. You got a lot of science already, and of course you always want to get more data.
Yep.
But what are some of your approaches to educating people, especially decision makers, who can help fund and help restore these waterways?
Really good question. So it's exactly what I'm doing right now. I go out and give lectures on this as much as I can. I have 6 lectures in the next 30 days to various public organizations. So I take it upon myself as my job to educate the public. But I also I've gone to Indian River, Martin, and St. Lucie County, and I brief them on exactly what's going on in their waters, how they can be part of this center, how we can update them on the research we're doing. They can feed back to us what's going on in their waters if their citizens are reporting stuff. So we start to reach out to the actual county level and try to get help or try to work together that way. I brief politicians all the time, try to get that message out there because they speak to people too. So any way I can do it, I don't say no to speaking engagements. And as part of our center, we're going to have a website up that people can use as a resource for, what's going on in the lagoon and the kind of research we're doing. We'll push this message out as hard as we can. So we're doing it now.
Just a quick comment. We collectively, I think, see sea trout and dolphins as kind of the mine canaries.
Yep.
You just told us that we humans are mine canaries, and I think that's a headline.
Yeah. Well, just looking at a simple study like that is scary. As a scientist, I would say correlation is not causation. That's not a study where they actually looked at toxin in humans. They just said, how do these things correlate? They're seeing an increase of deaths, like they do most studies, like when they find clusters of cancer or whatever. That's the first thing you do. That's your warning shot. It's like, oh, we better start actually testing people to find out. So that's exactly what we started doing. We saw that, and it's like, hey, maybe it's not true. There's a possibility that study's wrong. In science, you always have to accept that. But I'd rather know, so that's why we're just testing people directly. It's the only way to find out.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. It was great. I think the biggest impact on me when I was looking at those slides was not only the impact of the humans, because coming from Satellite Beach, we have a lot of the cancer concerns there.
Yep.
And I could tell you that there will never be a causation ever figured out in the way I've seen how they do that. So the correlation was good enough for me. I think that's a pretty big deal. But I thought the slide, when you're looking at the red tide and you see the public announcements come out, a lot of the literature or signage and things like that always called red tide naturally occurring. And I think the slide that you showed, that it is naturally occurring, but it's such a increase now.
We're enhancing its occurrence.
We're enhancing its occurrence, and I think that's really what, and the public knows this, so they get upset when they see things like naturally occurring, and they get mad because they think we're brushing it off, and I was wondering if you would mind if we shared that slide. Is that something that
not
you?
At all. You
Okay.
can use. I copied it on there. You can use any part of it, and if you want me to just send me an email, I can give you the actual PowerPoint, so it'll have whatever.
And we'll be calling you too to maybe do a presentation in Satellite Beach if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine.
That'd be great.
I'll come speak to anybody. Like I said, as long as it fits my schedule, I'll be there.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. Thank you. It was a great presentation.
I did, Dr. Sullivan, 2 questions. First off, I know we looked at the United States occurrences of HAB. Is that happening as well around the globe in areas that are around water?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Europe is getting hammered right now. They're they invest a lot more into have research because their aquaculture in Europe is far advanced of what we're doing. So they look at it as it's a real, besides a health problem, it's a real economic problem. They have huge aquaculture farms. They need to know where the blooms are, and they need to know how it's getting into their product, and they'll actually move their pens. If they know one's coming in, they'll move them away from the area. They try to respond to it. But their governments put a lot more money into that research. I mean, they're far ahead of us as far as bloom research. But it is a problem all over the world. Right now in the Asian countries, they're being inundated. I didn't even go into like sargassum problems and macroalgae problems. China and Korea, they're having huge problems with macroalgae. And it's still a problem. Like, even though it's not toxic, it can do a lot of damage to the environment.
Okay. And then my second question is, so in 2016 we had the bad fish kill, and when something that big happens, that grabs a lot of attention and can cause governmental bodies to move or to oversight committees to be created. And then a lot of people judge the health of the lagoon by those headlines.
They do.
So this past year, what if there was a reason, one reason or two reasons, why didn't we have as bad a fish kill this year as we did in 2016?
You have to have the environment, everything has to line up perfectly. So you have to have, the bloom has to be at a high, because the bloom, the amount of algae in the water will kind of oscillate. It'll go up and down depending on how many nutrients come in, how many sunny days you had, what the temperature of the water is, how the wind is blowing and mixing up. And the wind is a big thing. I mean, the Indian River Lagoon is really shallow. So you would never think you'd have anoxia in the lagoon because the oxygen will diffuse into the water and get to the bottom very quickly. And if there's any wind at all, you'll get that. But if you get some bright sunny days, really hot, and then followed by like no wind and really calm conditions, that's when it can happen. It can just set up. If you just got to get a lot of factors lined up, all of a sudden, boom, one night, all the oxygen will go. And that's how, you have to hit all those conditions. We had sporadic smaller fish kills this year, but nothing on the scale of what happened in 2016, just because the environment didn't hit all those marks at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Great.
So the next presentation by Dr. Drew Palmer was supposed to follow up on Dr. Sullivan's presentation beautifully. You'll recall that you heard from Dr. Palmer several months back, and Beth Falls with Orca. We had them doing a small pilot project in the Newfound Harbor area, first looking at general toxicity levels in the sediment. That was Orca's work. And then Drew Palmer with Florida Tech was looking at a subsample of the most toxic to the least toxic sample sites and looking for these very toxins that Dr. Sullivan just talked about. So he was looking at bacteria and toxins. The bacteria work is mostly complete. The extractions on the toxins is still ongoing. And rather than bring you an incomplete presentation today, we push that off till February or March. But so you can keep all of that in mind, and we will get some information collected locally on a pilot scale in a few months.
Okay.
So our next presentation is Holly Abeels with the University of Florida. Some months ago, you remember John Byron suggested that we reach out to the public and the scientists and ask for their feedback on the Save Our Indian River Lagoon project plan, what we were doing well, what we could do better, how we might shift resources in this iteration or following iterations of the plan. And so Holly has expertise in how to do survey and survey design, so we worked with her to get this done, and she's going to present results.
Yes, thank you, Virginia. Thank you, everybody, for having me speak today to your group again. My name is Holly Abeels. I work for the University of Florida IFAS Extension Office. I'm a Florida Sea Grant Extension agent there. And Extension our office has a lot of expertise in creating surveys, so Virginia asked me to work on this survey to provide feedback for the update of the Sabre Indian Lagoon Plan. So I want to highlight results of that survey today. So I'm going to show you in this presentation, I wanted to show you basically what the survey looked like when people were going in and taking the survey. So this was the very first page that people came up to. So it just describes why we're reaching out to people, why we're asking them to take the survey, about the project plan, and then there was a hyperlink for people to go and read on the 2018 project plan, and then it just talks about how it takes approximately 15 to 20 minutes depending on how much input you potentially want to put into the survey, and that the results would be presented either on a meeting like this, but Virginia has the full report as well. So the first thing we wanted to know was basically where people thought that they felt and what their background was. This was actually the only mandatory question that people had to answer in the survey. So we wanted to know if people were a lagoon scientist, if they had technical expertise applicable to the lagoon, if their livelihood was from the lagoon, so their expertise comes from that time on the water. If they were a nonprofit organization that works on lagoon issues, if they were a government organization, or if they were just a lagoon advocate, so someone that obviously is actively involved in knowing about the lagoon and being active in the lagoon, and so they don't fit into these above categories. Again, this was the only question that people had to answer, so they had to answer this question in order to continue on with the survey. And we had 109 people who answered this question and then proceeded to answer further questions. There were actually, I think it was like 79 people who answered that question, but then didn't answer any of the follow-up questions after that. So I took that out because there's nothing else to include in there. So here we have a good mix. Obviously, the majority of people were lagoon advocates, so people who didn't really fall in any of the other categories, but we have a good mix of those other representative groups providing information for this survey. So the next question, because the survey, or because the plan itself goes into the 4 Rs, the reduce, the remove, the respond, the restore, we wanted to break up the survey into those components. Because we asked a lot of questions, we didn't want to have just one full page of all this information and have people be a little bit overwhelmed. So I broke up the survey into its components. So the first part was talking about reduce type projects. And the beginning of each of these pages that delves into those 4 Rs included this table that showed the projects that are included in that particular type of project type. So in this example, the reduced type projects, and then the funding, the total estimated total project costs, the nitrogen and the phosphorus reductions, pounds per year, and then the average cost for those reductions for each of those types of projects, and then total for that particular group, the reduced group. So people got to see this table, they got to take a look at it, and then we asked them to answer a couple questions. So that in this instance, we asked them if they should more or less resources go towards projects that reduce incoming load of total nitrogen and phosphorus. Every R got this same question. And then we list the different types of projects under that. And then we asked specifically a question about if funds should be used to fund maintenance of public sewer infrastructure. Because of a lot of, I guess, news and information about a lot of sewer discharges, I think that's something that people are very much aware of and we hear about. So we wanted to have a question related to that to get people's input whether or not funding from the Sorrel project program should go into those. So for that first question, majority of people think more or the same amount of resources should go to these reduced type projects. And then a small majority thought either less or no resources should go into that. So obviously these are projects that people feel strongly about, and so they think that there should be either the same amount or more resources that should go into them.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
From this, are we trying to extrapolate that this is what the general population believes? Or, I mean, N equals 109 is not statistically significant in any way.
Yes.
So what are we gaining from this?
Just being able to have a way of people being able to give feedback to the project. So this was one way of people could say, these are where I think the resources should be going.
There's about half of them out there right now. Couldn't they just raise their hand? I mean, sitting here in the audience. Yeah.
But there are, some people that aren't going to come to a public meeting, or maybe they're...
Yeah, no, I got that. But N equals 50.
Right.
So we did all this to hear what 100 people think. That's all I'm wondering.
And part of this was and the time that we had to create the survey and then get it completed and analyzed before you were looking at an updated plan, we only had it out there for 3 to 4 weeks. So obviously, to have more participation, we'd want more time, both to get the word out that it's taking place and allow people time to complete the survey. So we imagine that we can do a much better job in driving participation next year, but this allowed us to sort of, trial run a survey and learn from this, what questions worked, what questions didn't work so well, how we need to reshape it for the next go-around. But it's still, I think, some, valuable information in here.
Yeah, and ideally, you could take this survey, like Virginia said, and make it available next year, but potentially all year long or 6 months before the update. So again, this was a very short period of time. The survey was only out for about 3 or 4 weeks. And we did only get 100 people, which you're right, is not a large survey amount of people to get. But I think it still is valuable information. You're getting information from people who obviously cared enough to take the survey and wanted to provide input. And potentially there are people that were in this audience today, or maybe others who don't have the opportunity to necessarily provide their input at a meeting like this. But I think you could take this and revamp it, have it available for a longer period of time. Potentially it could be something that's always available for people to provide their input.
How did the 100 come about? How did you find the 100 people?
So I know Brandon Smith put it on the Save Rainy Lagoon Facebook page, and I shared it on my office's Facebook page. It also went on to the NEP, Indian Lagoon NEP, so they sent it out to their email listserv.
Their management group, their STEM group, their citizen group.
Okay.
I forwarded it to my mailing list too.
Yeah, so it was...
I saw it going around. It was going around.
Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt her presentation, but if you look at the full report, and I suspect the full report will be available someplace, I'm not sure where, but there's lots of comments in the report written individually by people that are very thoughtful. Every single one of those comments I looked at, it took something away from. And so I think Holly's just trying to give you a quick overview so our meeting doesn't last till 4 o'clock this afternoon. Okay?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different ways you could take the survey and take out pieces, and I think the comments are really where people took the time to really put in what they thought. So
Probably more opinions that we didn't have before, so I think it's good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know much about poker, but I know that something beats nothing of a kind. And that's kind of what we've had. And I see this thing going forward. One of the reasons that I propose this is because we were hearing from occasionally, and I was hearing from people who are with a good scientific background, good technological background, saying, hey, you're doing things wrong. And so, okay, tell us how to do things right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think anytime you give someone the opportunity to be able to put their thoughts out, whether it's a public forum or something like this, where it's kind of anonymous. It's not like we're asking people. We did ask people at the end if they wanted to be contacted to please put their information so they could be contacted, but that was an option. So we're not, calling people out. And I think sometimes that helps people, right, to be a little bit anonymous so they can feel like they can really say what they want to say. So.
And you also have the Hawthorne effect, which I won't go into.
Yeah.
But while we're on the question, real quick, did you consider non-advocates?
We did not, which I think I would put, we kind of did the advocate as like the catch-all, but yeah, I think I would like maybe the next time to just say, I don't fall in any of these categories, so, and that way you can maybe get some other people. And we, like I said, there were, I think, 79 people that stopped at that first question and didn't answer, so either they looked at the rest of the survey and they were like, I don't have no idea what I could possibly say or provide input, or they just wanted to see what the survey said. So I mean,
So wait, when I'm looking at this percent on the graph here, we're only looking at the response from 30 people?
no, this is
No.
between 101 and 107 for this particular graph.
Okay, thank you.
There were an
Yeah.
additional 79 that
Thank you.
Yes, which are not included at all in this, yeah,
Thank
because
you.
they didn't answer the following questions, and so they don't have any data. Anything else? Okay. So we did ask about whether or not funds for the soil program should be used for maintenance of public sewer infrastructure. And people could either say yes, maybe, or no. So I like including maybes in questions because sometimes people really are just not sure whether or not they feel yes or no on a question. But in this case, the people who did say yes, we actually asked an additional question. So we asked them under what conditions should these funds be used to fund this the public sewer infrastructure. And these were their responses. So this is a write-in, as you can see here. So people had to write in what their response were. And I looked at all the comments and just tried to group people into similar types of comments for this presentation. So 14 people said failing or old infrastructure, that's who should get those funds. 6 people thought that obviously budgeting should already be occurring or should be happening for this type of maintenance. So potentially funds could be used for being able to have that budget in place for when things need to be upgraded or repaired. 4 people said either the maintaining agency doesn't have the funding, so they can't, don't have the current funding to be able to fund for that. And then 4, immediate threat to Lagoon or decrease in Lagoon conditions. And then you can see the other responses as we go down.
I just have I'm just wondering how many people answering that would know that most utilities have a rate structure to cover failing and old infrastructure. And if they have failing and old infrastructure, it's because their rate structure wasn't good enough or raised enough, high enough to cover their failing and old infrastructure. And I'm not real sure the regular population understands that.
Right.
So when they think of, well, should we fix it? Well, yeah, of course we should fix it. But what funding source should be available for that? And, once I explain to people that, utilities are designed to have a rate structure that covers this, and that, the Sorrel funds are right now dedicated to projects that we don't have other funding sources for, they immediately say, oh, yeah, we should just raise the rates. You know what I mean? So I'm not sure.
Couple comments on increasing it. And we did ask, if you don't mind if I go back real quick.
Because that was one of our biggest concerns when we started this whole thing, was not this survey, but this endeavor, was that the funding would be shifted to things that,
Yeah, and we did ask in that yes or no maybe question, we did say keep in mind utility operating permits require reasonable operation and maintenance. So we could have said that, we could have maybe expanded that or had maybe a larger explanation so people knew that. But that is definitely, I think, an area where people don't have enough education for that.
Yeah.
So.
Agencies aren't funded.
So moving right along, we now are talking about remove type projects. So this is the muck projects that we have in the plan. So again, they have that same table, so they can see how much funding goes into that, and then the average cost per pound for removal of nitrogen or phosphorus. And again, we're asking the same question based on the table: should more or less resources go to remove type projects? We did also ask if a 25% reduction in muck flux was a good target for dredging, and explain that this was picked based on models indicating that incoming nitrogen loads need to be reduced by an average of 24%. And then we asked them to explain that answer if they did say they yes, no, maybe, or no. So again, majority people think more or same amount of resources. There wasn't anyone who said no resources, so this just tells me that people do want some sort of funding going towards removal of muck. And we have, looks like kind of more majority of people saying maybe this sounds like a good target, this 25% reduction, with yes and then no following in that order. And then of course we ask people why they chose either yes, maybe, or no. So 16 people said that we should stop and put nutrients into the lagoon first. This was actually a kind of a common theme in several comments, was reducing the load going in first before having to remove it. And there was an equal amount of people that said that 25 seemed like a reasonable target, or that there should be a higher target. And this goes into the next series of questions for the remove, where people thought higher targets would be better versus just having the, I guess, what they thought might be the minimum target. And then 13 people didn't understand. They didn't feel like they had enough information to answer the question, so they were unsure what muck flux was.
Right.
So I think that's a good area for thinking about education,
Yeah.
talking to people about why we're removing and what muck flux is. So the next set of questions talks about restore. So these are our oyster reef projects and vegetative living shoreline projects, again with the question of more or less or same amount of resources. And then we asked about how the restore type projects were created, and the amounts that they were put in the plan was for the goal to be that the Indian River Lagoon would be filtered annually. So we'd have enough oysteries and living shorelines put in where the volume of the Indian River Lagoon was filtered annually. So we asked if that seemed reasonable, so if they wanted more filtration or less filtration, and then asking them to explain their answer. Again, large amount of people wanted either more resources or the same amount of resources for this question. And most people think, basically the majority of people think either the annual filtration or more filtration would be beneficial. Again, going back to a lot of the comments having to deal with, why do the minimum? We should be trying to do more if possible. A lot of people think that restoration is important, so we should be continuing these types of projects. There were 15 people who kind of fell into the category of where they thought restoration wasn't currently working, or that the oysters weren't thriving and that water quality needed to be better in order to continue with these projects. And so those are kind of lumped into one section right there.
That shows a good, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
that
it's okay.
shows a really good point of education.
Yes.
Because we had the zoo was at our sustainability board meeting on Wednesday, and they presented their, everything they've been doing, and everything's been thriving. So this idea that it's not is something that we might want to focus on from an educational
I think another
standpoint.
good educational opportunity
And
there.
I think that's just kind of pushed out by some people who want to see the priority switch, but,
Again, there's not enough responses here for us to extrapolate anything whatsoever. 13 people on my Facebook page this morning telling me muck doesn't work. So I appreciate the energy and the effort. It's a good start, but let's take it with a big grain of salt. How about?
Well, I think that combines with the things I'm seeing, too. I mean, I'm seeing that same, thing on Facebook, and I'm seeing, we all see it, that people, the general opinion a lot of times out there is that the oysters projects don't work. And,
Well, we haven't hardly done any of them. That's the problem fundamentally with the oyster projects. We haven't done any. What we've done has been extremely successful.
Yeah, I just have to say that's what I'm saying, is the ones that we've done have been successful, and so if people are saying that the ones that we have done aren't successful, that is obviously not true. So, that might be something that we want to concentrate on.
One of the things we're getting out of this is information on where we do need to do education. We're trying to get the bad stuff out. We're trying to keep the bad stuff out. But if we can't change our life practices, business practices, the economics of lagoon matters and so on, this is going to be Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing this every decade, and I bet you it ain't going to be supported.
Yeah, being an extension person, I look at a survey like this and I think of where are the areas that I need to lead education efforts in.
Right.
Like where are people missing information, or they're not understanding something. So that's what I see when I look at something like this. But I agree definitely, Courtney, that this is definitely another area where I think education would be important, just to relay all the successes that's been going on with the oyster project. So the last set of questions, we, is sort of a weird grouping, but I wanted to make sure that people understood that there is respond, within the plan and how that funding is distributed, so they also saw this table with the respond type projects. And then Brandon sent me this graphic to put in the survey so that people could refer to this graphic before answering the next set of questions. So this graphic shows at the top the total nitrogen loading sources to the River Lagoon. And so it shows the large percentage, obviously, of muck being a source, and then with septic and atmospheric, and the non-point source. Sorry, it's a little hard to see from here. And then also the total funding that goes from the soil plan that currently goes into these projects. So obviously a large amount of funding is going into the muck removal, and then we also have the septic system funding, a large amount of funding for that, and then a smaller amount of funding for the other types of projects. So we wanted people to have an idea of basically where the majority of the funding is going. They saw this in tables, but sometimes seeing it visually and all together also helps for people to be able to have an easier way of looking at this. And then we asked them to answer these questions. So we wanted to know how funding should be distributed between the projects. We have the 4 different project types, and they had to put in a number in here for the percentage that they thought the funding that should go into there, and that total should equal 100. So as they could put 25, 25, 25, 25, or they could put 50, 30, 10, 10, whatever it was, that they wanted to put in. And then we asked if there were any project types that should receive less funding. So this is sort of redundant into the other questions, kind of having them maybe think a little bit more clearly now that they've seen all of the different types of projects. If you had to choose, what type of project should release less funding. And then opposite of that, if more funding was available, checked all the project types that received more funding, and actually had the option to check all 4 or just 1 or 2 or 3 of these. So this is showing how funding should be distributed. So this is where they could put that percentage in. You could see that the means for reduce and remove are larger for restore and respond. But I also want to draw your attention to those black standard deviation bars, the error bars. And because all of the bars overlap, there really is no statistical difference between any of these answers. So there was a large range of answers for each of these different types of projects. But I know when I showed this to Virginia the other day, she was pointing out that a large amount of funding for the project, for the plan, already goes to reduce and remove. So those types of projects. So it coincides to this graph where people are sort of agreeing with that.
Yeah. Do you see that ratio consistent right now, our plan with the reduce and remove?
No.
Remove is a little higher, don't you think?
Yeah, remove is higher and restore and respond are lower.
Yeah. I think we might, when we get into the projects, and not just the projects, but the ones that aren't replacements, we might want to talk about that, because I don't think I go anywhere without somebody talking about wanting to shift more funding to removing septic tanks. And I don't know, we talked about that on the phone, but I think, maybe we really put a little bit of effort and talk about North Merritt Island and, those areas a little bit more going forward. And I don't know what the timeline would be to do that and how we would do with the group, but, that's just my opinion. I think, just from what I'm hearing from the public, that's kind of the direction I see a lot of people wanting us to go in.
There was quite a bit of comments throughout the survey that people did want more reduction.
Yeah, that's what I'm just hearing from the general public. I know I don't think they don't see us wanting to stop remove, but there's a general feeling that we do more of that than reduce, and I see that coming out there, and that matches what I'm hearing from the public, and also seeing the traffic on Facebook.
And it does, unfortunately, with removal of muck, it is such a large expenditure.
Yeah, it sucks up your money. Yeah. And we're not getting any state funds yet, so.
I want to make sure I understood, because I think I agree with everything you just said. I think what I'm hearing from people is we need to stop the input of nutrients, whether it be from septic, from sewage, from stormwater. And I think if the whole idea of muck flux makes sense, which I'm not a scientist, so it's been explained to me and I accept it, that is a method of reducing input, but I'm not sure it's bought by everybody yet.
Correct. Yeah.
And if we take more septic tanks out, people can see that, and it's got an immediate result, which has been demonstrated.
Because I don't see shifting it to do what they want us to do as bad. I mean, it may not be like what we originally planned, in a little bit, but I think it would be, I think we should control that, you know what I mean, when we're looking at that, instead of it being reactive later without a plan.
We are in the process of finishing up our draft changes to the plan. We'll take whatever your motion is today about substitute projects and incorporate that into all the other changes we're making. We're trying to ship that to Tetra Tech today.
Okay.
So if you, as a body, want to direct us, to shift dollars one way or another, this is the moment.
That's what I thought. And I'm just seeing it everywhere, and that just kind of solidified my...
I think we've got a problem with our lingo, and it comes up right here. First stop the influx of nutrients into the lagoon, and that's juxtaposed against should we keep dredging. That's the wrong question. First stop the influx of nutrients into lagoon waters. If you add the word waters, you then start to look at where it comes from, and the biggest single source is muck flux. So we're having a nonsense argument about whether we should focus on the sort of stuff you're talking about and shift dollars from dredging. And what that leads us to is increasing the amount of nutrients, or at least reducing at a much slower rate the amount of nutrients that are in the lagoon waters. The second point to make is the stuff that's coming in from outside. Where does it go? Well, some of it floats around in the water and the critters eat it and all that. But a lot of it goes into the muck as sequestered nutrients that we need to later get out. I think we need to always add the word waters behind the word lagoon when we're talking about what we are really trying to treat and deal with.
I agree with that, John. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. I agree with that. I think it is true that we know that, but I also think that just, from a public standpoint and politically, we may lose that argument, and I think we may want to look at how we can address those concerns from the public, among the committee, and decide how we want to, address that, rather than having it addressed for us. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if it's a concern, I don't think we're gonna be able to educate everyone on that today. You know what I mean?
We should be able to educate policymakers.
We should.
They
yes,
need to
I
understand
agree.
it.
But they're also reacting to the public, and I think, unfortunately, that's just the rule of thumb,
John, I agree with you that the term waters, which is implied in any statement that I make, we've demonstrated the amount of time that a muck project is taking. As an example, MIMS, which was, I believe, originally described as a small project, it's been 15 months to get a little teeny project done, and I don't know if we have monitors to see what the impact has been. On the other hand, we can go take a septic system out and immediately see an impact on the waters. So while I don't argue that it may be the largest thing, I don't want to wait 8 more years for us to get around to dredging when we can do things today that will have an impact. That's just my opinion.
But back at that, every month and every year we delay dredging, delays by months and years us dealing with the largest single source of nutrients in the river.
We've already got the dredging plans in place.
Yeah.
It took 15 months to do a little hole.
That was the
It's the
first
same.
Yeah, I didn't recognize. nothing is immediate. Everything is going to take a lot longer. There are no septic tanks that have been removed where we've seen an immediate response in the lagoon. Okay, and so let's just drop that idea completely. I would like Holly to finish, and then we can have this ranting amongst ourselves. And you know, we've got a public out here waiting to have comments too. And you know, I know how much some of you enjoy the verbal sparring. I'm not sure it's getting us any place, so let's let Holly finish if that's okay with you,
Yeah, I
Chair.
only have maybe like 5 more slides of that, so thank you. And I actually had some comments, but I'll wait until afterwards. So, all right. So then we asked whether or not any projects should receive less funding. There was only 39 people that answered this. 13 people said none, so they should, all get funding. Restore and Respond had the number of people that said 5 for each of those, and then remove 3 or reduce 2. Actually, and I had presented this the other day, and I had a bottom part of this graph, which you won't be able to see because it's a PDF, but it was pointing out that there were, I think, 7 people that said that they thought reduced type projects should be done first. So kind of just going back to the discussion we were just having before. So they just thought that funding should go to those first, and then going to, I think, remove was the other one. And then if more funding becomes available, what project types would you like to see more funding? Pretty much all the project types should receive more funding. And again, people could check one or all of these, so there is a higher number of totals here. But again, people think that really all the projects, if funding was available, could receive more funding. And then we just had a couple last comment boxes. If the plan is missing any project types that should be implemented, if you have any additional comments, which I'm not presenting here, and then if they would like Brevard County staff to be contacted, if they wanted them to contact them, they could put their information here. So this is the list of projects where people thought that they were missing and maybe it could be implemented. On the left-hand side is a grouping of where more than one person mentioned this type of project. I tried to group them as best I could based on what the comments were. And then on the right were ones that one person said. So 14 people said none, and then we have a large listing of all different other types of projects. And I think that was my last slide. Oh, and then this was just the summary. Again, this is a small sample size, but I think it's just a beginning of being able to have an easy way of getting comment from the public. In general, people want more funding for everything. And then how funding should be distributed, they kind of coincides to what's going on currently. And then there was a theme in the comments towards reducing input first, so there were a lot of people that talked about that. And then I think education for the muck and muck flux, and then the education about reduced type projects and other things like that, and the oyster restoration successes. I think those are the areas where we can have additional education.
So that second bullet up there, I mean, if it's not constrained, if it isn't a question that says if you have $1 to spend, how would you spend it, then you always get the answer that everything should get more money. So that's a suggestion for going forward. And did we see any, for the comments that said spend more money or more money sooner on reduced as opposed to remove, was there any, there was no a quantification of that? It wasn't, if we're spending, right now we're spending, it looks like 2/3 of the money on remove, did they say we should make that, 1/2 and move it over, or we didn't try to get to any of that?
Yeah, there wasn't that type of quantification.
Yeah.
We could probably look back on the comments for those that said that in.
There was, when we constrained, you only have 100%. So how do you want to divide your 100%? And that was the 4 blue bars that had error bars that were so long that the answers weren't significantly different. Yeah.
So you could go back on that, and because I have documented each one's responses, so you could look at the people that said reduce first, and then go back to see what percentage they would like to see for this.
Can you go back to Brandon's?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that most people don't remember or don't know is
this column right here is wastewater treatment discharges. And before the 1990 Indian River Lagoon Act, when all of our wastewater treatment plants were discharging to the lagoon, the scale of this bar was more than 4 times the height of this septic bar. So it was, off the chart up here. And that's reductions that have already occurred. And at some point, we've done a lot of the reductions, and that's why the largest source of nutrients to the water column remaining is muck. And so we don't do a very good job of telling the story of all the reductions that have already taken place that get us to the point where now we got to clean up the old mess.
Stephanie, to Terry's point.
I'm sorry, and then Vivian, you can be after me.
Holly, great job on explaining the survey results. And I think this for everybody here on the board is to understand that when you develop a survey instrument like that, one of the things you want to do is test it in the field and to get some validation on it. And I think in part you did that with this survey. And I also think it's important to understand that the sample size isn't the most important thing, but it's getting a representative sample. And you could probably do a sample size of 100 as long as it's representative and get the results that reflect what people are concerned and are, want to see. So I hope we can do this survey again down the road, because I think it can help drive us into what John was saying about maybe where we need to focus on education and some of the things Courtney was saying, but maybe where we need to put our resources as we approve and look at these projects. So again, good job.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
Vinny?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that the question is, where do we go from here? So I know we've got this instrument built. So then how do we go about making sure next year we either have a more representative sample size or a larger sample size? I know we have, I know Dr. Windsor, you sat on the board to pick up marketing. Don't we have marketing and PR education money that was set aside? Maybe we could team one of those recipients with this survey to help make sure it is pushed out, or actually we have a plan to market it, because that's going to control and that's going to really tell our numbers, is how are we getting it out there and who are we getting it out to. So that might be a nice pairing. It also would be good, I'd like to see whatever we decide as a plan for next year. I love getting this out before the project plan so that we can get some feedback, but I would like to be able to see the questions for comments and that I could make any suggestions in advance of it being done. Then the final thing is, one of the things I always like the Duplicity, not just the movie, it was a crazy movie, but using an instrument for more than one task. And I like using the survey obviously to gather information, but I think it's also a great place to educate. And I think we can put a lot of this information that we're always talking about on that page. Obviously we don't want to steer a decision or a response, but having information on that page I think is a benefit. And the survey is great. I'd love to see it, just because I'm I guess a tech guy, I'd love to see more videos and audios and bells and whistles. I just think that first page where there were 3 big paragraphs, if somebody sees that, they're going to be like, oh, whoa, this is way too much time. Yeah. So I'd love to see, big buttons, flashing lights, and sounds like they do in Vegas. Just have the lottery, like the jackpot sound going over the speakers. But I think it's great. I would like to know where we go from here. Use it for education and maybe team it with one of our marketing recipients to really knock it out of the park next year. Thank you, Holly.
Daniel?
I think we really need to spend some of our education and marketing dollars on what Virginia just pointed out. I could see a little animated video going viral on social media, and I think that we really, really need to convey that message on the reduction that's been done, what caused the muck in the first place, how much muck is there, and the impact that the muck has over septic and sewer.
Excellent. Yes.
I think the next iteration of this, I think there needs to be a lot more articulation and explanation of the money flow and the money timing and the money phasing. We keep asking questions here, do you think we need more money? And everybody says, yep, we need more money. The fact is, if we could spend every dime that's currently in the bank and real green money, we would increase the amount of funding currently applied by tenfold. We've booked about $80K. We spent about $80 million. We spent about $8 million, and that's something that isn't appreciated in this. I think we just need to better articulate the dollar side and asking not do we need to increase the funding in this area, but rather do we need to increase the funding in this area beyond what is already allocated. It's as much a balance question as it is a fixed amount question.
Lorraine?
Just to say, great presentation, great start, great comments. Just to reiterate, I'm really eager to see our results next year when we include more of the general public, because we've got this whole diffusion of innovations going, and we know what the early adopters think. We've got to get beyond the early adopters. We've got to expand that. Okay.
Thank you.
One small suggestion. The East Central Florida Regional Planning Council has a contract with MetroQuest, which is very similar to what you were talking about. That's very, it's a web-based survey tool that is very visual.
Yeah.
It's real easy. We did our climate change survey with that, and you can put it on your website, put it through Facebook, and it also protects the IP address, so somebody can't sit on the computer and do the same thing over and over again. So that may be and I know that they have that, like a contract with that, and we may be able to use that at very little cost, so that might be an idea to get that done.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today.
So do you want to proceed with the 3 Lagoon story videos, or do you want to get to?
Let's get to the project.
It's 10 o'clock.
Yeah, break would be good.
Let's do a quick break. Yeah.
Break, and then I'd like to do project. I think we
Yeah, I think we should do the projects. We can do the videos later. Because I'm in one of them and I don't want to see it.
I agree.
What's that?
I'm in one of them and I don't want to see it.
Also, just so that before we take our break,
Have you seen?
there are speaker cards available if you would like to speak during public comment. They're back. They're up here. I'm sorry, pink.
You want to talk about 2 public comments?
And there will be 2 public comments. There will be an opportunity for public comments after we talk about the projects, and then there will be general public comments at the end of the meeting. So if you wish to speak for either of those while we're taking our break, take advantage of the pink cards up here. All right, we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 10:10.
Do I come yet? No.
We'll see.
Thank you. We are moving into new business, which is the 2019 project funding requests. And I have one speaker card from James E. Sloan. If you would like to come up before we begin our discussion about the projects, we would love to hear from you.
Eventually I'll make it. I need a new hip, maybe January the 30th.
We don't do hips.
I know you don't do hips, but I'll be glad to get back to my exercise program. I'm a supervisor in the Brevard Soil and Water Conservation District, newly elected with a new agenda for that district. We have noticed that in the 2018 Lagoon Plan, under Section 3, there is no participation by the Florida Department of Agriculture to determine stormwater contamination loading. There are no figures in there. It is truly the responsibility of the district and the Florida Department of Agriculture to provide that information. So starting in 2019, we in the district, who are the ones that work with the Office of the Florida Department of Agriculture, has an Office of Agricultural Water Policy. They provide us funding, technical information, and they wrap our hands when we don't do things right. But we do get our money from them. So we at the district are starting in 2019 a study and an identification of the agricultural areas and some of the larger individual plats in the unincorporated areas of Brevard in order to come up with load factors for contamination. And we hope to complete that in 2019 and then coordinate that result into your plan as a partner. I do not see, and then at that point we have to decide what areas need to have mitigation projects established. Those mitigation projects probably will be paid for by the Department of Agriculture's Office of Water Quality Management. However, we do accept donations and support from the local Brevard government. So that'll all be negotiated once we decide what has to be done. And that basically is all I wanted to pass on to you today, that we're picking up the task and we intend to move forward with it. And I noticed in some of my lobbying that I've done, because the climate has changed in the state with the new governor and with the new commissioner of agriculture. They're much more receptive to it, and they've taken notice of what's happening here in Brevard. It's been a good selling point for me to get that project underway. That's about it. If you have any specific questions.
That last comment, what they see in Brevard, I mean, my first thought was they see the public support for an initiative.
Actually, you're not well publicized.
Pardon?
So you're not well publicized outside of the county. You seem to be talking to yourself. When I bring it up, I have to explain the fact that it's a widely supported item here in Brevard. When I ran for election, I had 400,000 voters to contact, and almost universally there was support for what you're doing here. And I pass that along to those that I work with in the Department of Agriculture. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, I heard about it, but I don't know much about what's going on. But I use you as a selling point for support that we need from them.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Can I, then, if we're not heard about, if we're not infamous per se, how do we become that? Because that to me sounds like that if other counties realize that this is the process that we've gone through or that we've chosen, that cooperation between counties would be beneficial.
You're kind of in a situation where it appears to me, this is my opinion, in the past state government projects have been focused on the industrial agricultural areas and the contamination in the larger areas where the agricultural is a big industry. And that's been the total focus up to this point. And the Brevard District and the Office of Agricultural Water Policy is supposed to be focused on the grassroots level, no matter what's happening. And that's what we intend to do. And then what you intend to do as far as publicity, I can't make recommendations on that.
Virginia, maybe the Natural Resource Management Department can reach out.
There's been some really great opinion editorials in the Florida Today. However, the Florida Today is not read much outside of here. Okay, I mean some really remarkable. I've been using those as, kind of a lobbying effort. Hey, look what they're doing here, so. But I'm not working in your program. I'm a partner. Okay, that's what you've got. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would suggest that your comment about the word not getting out is something that ought to be heard by Dwayne and National Estuary Program and by the Indian River Lagoon Coalition. They do cover all the counties, all the cities, and I know they're aware of it, but perhaps their outreach could extend further than it does, just communicating that there are best practices and leading edge examples that others might look at.
Yeah. We just remember that this is my opinion in my lobbying and survey of the state government that supports us in the district.
Good stuff.
Nothing more, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You want me to introduce this? So you have in your packet all of the proposals that were received this year with short forms of the information that you asked us to distill in the prior years from those applications. You have a summary sheet with numbers in the third column that you can use to reference these projects. And you have the draft motion that has worked for you in the past years. So I think you have the...
I will entertain a motion.
Where's the...
Didn't we last year pick numbers? We went around, we picked numbers we wanted to discuss before we...
I think what we did last year, we made the motion
We made the
first.
motion.
Okay. Oh, and then we did discussion.
So I'll move that the Save Our Indian River Lagoon Project Plan Oversight Committee recommend modification of the Save Our Indian River Lagoon Project Plan to include all the projects listed in the 2019 project funding request list.
Second?
I second.
All right.
Now-
Now we're open to discussion.
Perfect.
So if there are projects that you would like to discuss further, and
Might I
possibly...
suggest, rather than jumping around from project to project, can we just go sequentially and see if anybody has a question on the first one, the
That's a
second
good
one, the
idea.
third one, the fourth,
Thank you.
so on and so forth?
Good idea.
Project 66B, I'm wondering what the additional $200,000 funding source will be. It's it's first one,
Okay.
first project, 66B.
Same question.
And it's a $283,000 project. We would donate approximately, or contribute approximately $26,000. Is there an additional $250,000 source for this? If not, we shouldn't tie up our $25,000.
Courtney, you want to, can you trade these?
I just had,
That was the match.
I was just wondering, like it says, the source of local cost shares, the utility, but is that budgeted? Because it says it's budgeted, but the match hasn't been secured, so I was confused.
It says we gave yes. This local project match and adopted budget, yes.
Okay, so just an explanation of why this project is here like it is. You guys approved it last year. They added on extra removal than what we approved, so we're basically now suggesting that we accept that extra removal and pay for that extra part of it now. So it's an addition to the project that came later on. They did not know about it last year when they submitted.
So did they do the project last year?
No, they realized that they could make an adjustment to expand the project to treat twice as large an area, and they asked staff, how do we do that? And we said, you're going to have to come through the process. And so this application is requesting that you consider expanding the prior approval to this much larger project with the larger cost share that it would be eligible for. So it does say is local project match in the adopted budget, yes in fiscal year 18-19.
For the utility.
And it looks like they've also applied for TMDL or 319
You
grants.
have the city manager back here.
Right, yeah.
So this project is approved, the previous version of this is approved,
Yes,
and now we're just deciding whether we want to add addition onto it.
yes.
Okay.
And this has happened, this has come up with other projects, so this might be something we want to consider in the future, a different process for this, if this does get too confusing.
I would recommend in the future we get the previous one that was approved, so we can see what the difference is. This one just looks like, and I appreciate trying to expand on a project, but having a comparison on what is already approved and what we're approving today would be helpful.
Yeah. Is that the total in this?
No, I think this is the
This is
add-on.
just the addition?
I'm not completely positive, I wish I had the whole thing with me, but I believe that's just the add-on.
Mark,
The add-on was 283,000?
No, the 25,000.
25 from us, but where's the other 250 coming from?
Well, so that's
I want to hear
back to
from the
what
guy
was
who
the...
knows.
The guy who knows everything.
Okay.
Confusing about it.
All right, Mark.
Good morning. Mark Ryan, City Manager, City of Inner Harbor Beach. This project is being expanded to provide additional areas for treatment. The funding source for the local match is our stormwater utility fund.
Okay.
What was the original project cost that we approved last year?
Around $250,000, I believe, with $25,000 to $26,000 funding from the sales tax.
That's what I
Yeah,
expected to hear.
right, the project size is doubling, so the cost share should be roughly doubling.
Now I get it.
The cost, well, what we're paying for, because they're increasing the area, but the cost of the baffle box didn't go up by 2x.
Correct.
Right, went up by...
We're trading more area.
Yeah, right, okay, good. Cool. Seems cool to me.
Yep. Thank you.
One question I have, I'm sorry. I just if you were to compare the cost per pound of nitrogen with this to the other baffle boxes, this one is higher. And is that and just so that we're educated and the rest of the public educated, is that because of the location is
Yes.
causing particular additional costs?
We have a unique opportunity with this baffle box because we city owns some land around it that we can utilize that for additional treatment for the project.
Okay. So it's just the location and the particulars that's causing the cost per nitrogen to go up?
That I can't really answer. I'd have to have our engineers answer that. But again, the ideal site for this is we have some area around where the baffle box is going to go, so I have the ability to provide additional treatment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Where is exactly going?
Yacht Club Boulevard and near Cynthia.
So there's a lot of concrete around here.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why.
About 60-something acres of...
Right.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. We got through the first one.
A general comment to staff, I found it really helpful to be able to look up when the longitude and latitude numbers were in there. It was really, with Google Earth, really nice to be able to get a bird's eye view.
And similar comment, I would like all the locations to be in exactly the same format.
Yeah.
So if District 1 is listed in one, then
Took a
the
lot
district should be in
longer.
all of them. If the lat lawns are in one of them, it should be in all of them. It would be simpler. I had a hard time finding some of the locations, and that's why I went back to the original proposals and went back and got the site plans and figured out where all these places were.
Yeah, and the lat long's super helpful. I don't care what district it's in.
Well, just same format.
Same format.
Yeah.
All right. Are there questions? What's the next one that we have questions on? Let's put it that way.
Well, why don't we just keep going down the list? The next one's the Basin 1304 bioreactor.
Any questions on that one?
Okay.
M1 Canal?
Okay.
Fleming Grant?
Just a general question on the BAMs. This is, obviously the numbers that are put in there is for the installation of the BAM. And we do know there is some changing of the media that needs to happen or can happen, but that's not included in this. This is actually just putting down in the installation of the BAM.
Right, so the utility would have to replace the BAM when required. And we have contract language, when they receive the grant funds, they agree to maintain the project going forward.
Okay, so that puts them in responsibility for replacing that media. Okay, thank you.
I have another question too on the BAM. So the media, approximately how often does that need to be replaced, or does that depend on where you are in terms of maintenance? So there's not a standard maintenance cost on it?
Right. It depends a lot on, what media and the design of the project. So if the project can be designed in such a way that the media can remain saturated, then wood chips should last decades. If the media can't remain saturated, then wood chips are going to break down quickly, and we would opt for a more expensive media with a 30 to 50-year lifetime. So, there are different media incorporated into different ones of these proposals, but, based on that project design.
A lot of them had the Bold and Gold, and I know that's a petroleum-based product, so is that something, is there a reuse or a way that's not an issue?
So it's and Walker went on the tour, so there is tire crumb, a small amount of tire crumb in the mix that provides the carbon source that the microbes need for denitrification. But the majority of the mix is expanded clay, ceramic, sand, other things that provide surface area for the microbes.
Yeah, and I just want to thank staff for some emails back and forth, because they've chosen to use wherever they can wood chips that are coming from our landfill that essentially have about a $13 a truckload cost. The real cost is transportation and installation. And the Bold and Gold only in appropriate areas or where required, for example, on a state contract. So done a great job here looking at ways to utilize waste to make it worthwhile and to keep the cost down. So thank you, Virginia.
All right. I think we're to the Hispaniola applicant. Basin 1298 bioreactor.
Basin 1298.
This is more of a format, or I don't know what it means exactly, but both of these basin upgrades refer to retrofit of an existing stormwater pond on Wickham Road. Seems like one or more of those is probably incorrect.
Right. There was one that said Banana River, and then it said Wickham Road, so that I caught that last night.
And this is, again, where, to John's point, we're not consistent with the format. Area where the project is located, one says Barrier Island, the other one is silent, so. And one
I think
final
that's just the
point,
way they're
well,
filling them out,
cut and paste, maybe?
No, it's just different cities are filling them out, or different
Right, so the
staff
county
members are
projects,
doing it.
the county utility staff are used to, we always have to say what district.
Right.
And the cities are providing the lat long.
Right.
So we can work on that consistency. Got that, made that note.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just, we only do it once a year, so.
They're not very good at it?
We're terrible on it.
Oh, okay. I like the table. The table is really good. If there was some way to tie these numbers, the reference numbers are really good, but they don't show up anywhere on the individual sheets, which makes it a sort of page through.
Okay. And maybe we need an overall map with these
Locations.
project numbers on the map.
Great.
That would be very great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now you're just blowing our minds.
By year 4 or 5 of this committee, we'll have this stuff down.
Right.
I mean, we'll be,
Yeah.
we'll be a well-oiled machine.
Okay, yes.
I think there is a comment due. I recall our first meeting in February 2017 with a 249-page agenda that looked like a dog's breakfast as far as how the information was presented and so on. This is a credit to Virginia and staff for orchestrating an extremely effective process, and even more so for their liaison with the applicants, so that we've ended up with clean copies of every application this year, and well done to all around.
Yes, thank you.
And it looked, credit credit to Brandon, but it looked much nicer before he had to make it ADA compliant.
And to that last point, if we could get maybe a price per nitrogen and phosphorus on the chart too, on the table.
Yes. It's on the long form.
It's on the long form.
Yeah, I didn't know if we could see it on the table as well. I just thought that might.
I went and had to
You're going to get really tiny.
add that.
Well, I think there's room for 4 levels of text under the type, so where it says total nitrogen, wouldn't there be room for another level underneath that, and total phosphorus, room for another level? Keeping the same font size? Again, there's some ADA requirements on that, Virginia, and I don't know how those play out. But barring those, please, Dr. Winterstone.
If I could address Vinnie's comment, there's actually 2 costs per pound that are in the proposals for nitrogen. One is what the project costs. The other one is how much we're paying.
Yes.
Which number would you want, or would you want both of them? And the reason I'm asking this is I think this is going to create a lot of confusion unless we just put the simple table of instructions it's on everybody's desk today, the instructions that the applicants got, combine that with the table, what we pay per pound.
I think it's a good question. Off the top of my head, I'd like to see what we're paying out as opposed to what the project is doing overall, but I'd like to hear feedback.
That's the eligible funding on each
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And on that point, and
or less.
I think I know the answer, but
Yes.
a lot of these projects are similar with drastically different cost per pound, and that's because of the size of the project, the location, just for the public. Could you?
Right, so the basin area that's bringing stormwater to wherever this project might be located, that was the issue with the first project. They were able to modify it in such a way that it's treating a larger basin, and so the more water that's getting to your project, the more cost-effective that project is going to be. And so, the plan is built around trying to find those largest project opportunities first. And as those get completed, we work our way into smaller and smaller projects that cost more per pound.
And that's what I'm not saying the cost is something that we should not do, but it is something to be aware of, especially when we're looking at locations and basins, the additional costs.
Yeah, and just to kind of back to 2017 when we were first going through this, and I asked the same question, why does it cost 5 times as much in the city of Melbourne or out on the beach? And it's been explained, and as a general statement, I mean, there's not a lot of property on the beaches and the barrier islands, and it's more expensive to do a lot of things. And so, yeah, and the engineers talked about concrete and poles and things that have to be moved. So we can't just go, it's $25,000 to drop one of these anywhere in the county, because it's not.
If you have to move a sidewalk, if you have to move a power pole, it's all, dependent on the
Madam Chairman,
All right.
I think we're proving that editing is not a team sport, and I would suggest that going forward that perhaps you could develop a straw man and drop it on the committee in the months ahead, and we'll have time to chew on it and emendate it and so on, so that going into next year's follies, we'll have a baseline that we like.
This was easy to read.
We are now to John Rudd's point.
On number 90, just question about cost share. It doesn't appear that there's enough cost share in the application. $117,000 project, $23,000 from us. Where is the balance of the money going to come from?
So that's within County One, and the engineers working on this, they have other sources of funds from, I believe, a legislative grant, and...
Okay, they weren't listed in the application that I read.
Okay. On the long form?
On the long form.
It says legislative funding.
It did?
All right. Burkham Road. Questions? Carter Road. Wiley Road. Broadway Pond.
$400 a pound on nitrogen removal on Broadway. Is that right?
And that's pretty much in line with the other ones in that area, I think, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
is a wall.
And that's a bank retrofit.
Yeah. So those bank retrofit projects are more expensive per pound. So the sales tax dollars are still cost-sharing the same eligible amount, but the county's utility will have to kick in a larger share to make that project happen.
Okay, and they're prepared to do that?
Yes.
Cherry Street.
I was just going to ask, so, well, I think I know the answer, but the legislative funding, is that money that comes through the DEP, the Florida?
Yeah, so that was a legislative funding request that was approved by the House and the Senate and was not vetoed by the governor, and then it is contracted through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection.
Okay.
Cherry Street. Spring Creek. THS Titusville High School, is that what that is?
Is Fernwood baffle out?
Sorry?
I have one of the original ones. Okay, thanks.
Yes, they withdrew their application.
Okay.
Coleman Pond.
With that one, I just wanted to point out that the quality benefits for that is pretty high, like, and really low cost.
Right, so with those floating aquatic plant projects, the initial installation cost is quite low. It's a great way to start getting benefits very quickly. The permitting is a snap, but they require much higher maintenance and replanting costs going forward, so that's a decision that the city of Titusville has made, that they're willing to make that commitment to maintain that project going forward.
So this is a good strategy, I think, for... Okay.
Right, using what you have and making it perform better, yes.
Cocoa Beach.
Yeah, I get some comments on this, and I was able to get my questions satisfied through correspondence with Brandon. It kind of made me pause a little bit, being with a water plant, a wastewater plant, some of the concerns we've had about it, but I was pleased and satisfied.
This is a $5 million request that we're going to pay $1 million for. Is that the one?
Correct.
Yep. It's great to see it happening. This is the water reclamation facility that's in the plan, correct?
No.
This is a replacement, okay. Sure.
So I know it said that there was C attachment number 4 for additional information. And I know it said it's to be used for emergency power. That other additional stuff that's in the long form application, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so you should have the long form. Carol, wasn't that distributed, the long form for this one?
I don't think it was.
If it was, Brandon put them on the computer and put a folder on there, but I don't know if he distributed them. They weren't part of the packet.
The long form was the ones that were...
It's on the...
You have to put long. I mean, it was 50.
And I have comments that were submitted by David Lane that he asked us to share with you. So his concerns about the Cocoa Beach submittal, whether the wastewater plant upgrade issue is something that the COC wants to get into. They have a funding source already. They could levy increases on their customer base. Says, I would be more in favor pending supplemental funding in the future, as this is a $5 million proposal.
But this is reclaimed, isn't it?
It's a $1 million proposal from our standpoint, not a 5. However, it represents probably the largest, well, the second largest individual proposal for this time. If you're satisfied, Charles, I'm okay, because you know more about this scientifically, but should maybe somebody from Cocoa Beach explain what this whole project is, since we're going to write a check for $1 million, and there he is?
There's somebody.
But before we get to that, what you just said is wrong. This is not a exceptionally large project in the year. It is an exceptionally large project in this list of substitute projects.
Correct.
We need to keep that balance.
Yeah, no, this is only $9 million out of a $80 million budget. This is a little part.
Yeah.
But it's the only one we get to talk about, John.
All right.
I'm a Cocoa Beach guy.
Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning. Brad Blaze with Mead and Hunt. I'll try to keep it brief. I know you have a long agenda, but the project goals are to increase wastewater treatment plant resiliency and redundancy. It will reduce surface water discharges and potential for plant overflows during storm events and extended wet weather periods. Also includes sludge handling upgrades, which are not necessarily directly water quality related, but they represent a fairly small portion of the project. Replacing influent screens that are larger. We're constructing a new emergency bypass that can bypass around a portion of the biological system and go directly to the clarifiers in larger filters. So we're also putting in upgraded filters, adding peak hydraulic capacity in the filters so we can move stormwater flow through the process. It will still get treated, it will still get disinfected, it will still get filtered, but it won't go through the full biological process, and it also won't overflow the walls. So part of the projects that are going on at Cocoa Beach are improving the ability of the collection system to move more water to the plant, but part of that problem is when you have more water to the plant, instead of overflowing the collection system, you have to deal with it somewhere. So this is a mechanism for dealing with that additional flow, getting it treated, and it also allows us to use the ASR well more effectively, or it's now a UIC injection well. So overall, what we established was a baseline year of 2016 is a year that represents a fairly normal baseline, and these improvements will allow us to treat the storm flows that we've quantified based on historical numbers, and our pounds calculation was based on that comparison.
I have two comments. First off, I don't have any questions on the project. I think any of the projects are good. The question that I have, first off, is I still have an issue with I guess the reclaimed water with the high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus that's in it, and I know it's probably better. We've got to do something with the water we use, and reclaim is a good thing. I understand that. So if they bypass some of that in peak loads, do we know how much higher the nitrogen and phosphorus is going to be in that water?
Given the fact that our loading of nitrogen, phosphorus, and other components during storm events is significantly lower than during normal domestic flow events. To specifically quantify what the influent loadings are versus the effluent loadings, we'd have to do some specific sampling pre and post. The problem is we have I'll call it a secondary lift, a transfer lift after the biological portion, and those transfer pumps can fail during power outages. They're also sized for a 2 times average flow. We're sizing these new improvements for a 3 times average flow. So, short of going into, very, very expensive hydraulic upgrades and changes, this is the most cost-effective way to manage that.
To increase that flow. And then, Virginia, I know as David said, so have we done another wastewater treatment project like this?
It's not wastewater, it's water.
Right. Well, I know it's water reclamation. I know they're using the reclaim, but we don't have a category for that. So I was combining it into a wastewater treatment upgrade.
So we classified it more like the INI, the smoke testing INI reduction, because the goal, as we understood it, was to reduce storm-based overflows.
Okay.
So we used that same methodology to come up with the cost share, right? It doesn't fit any of our boxes exactly. Pick a box.
Right.
But that was.
So this isn't similar to the other reclamation projects?
No, because that's treating the reclaimed water. This is more or less being able to handle more of it in peak times. Is that
correct? We're enabling the handling of the flow that's going to come when we basically bring more flow in. We're taking a lot of efforts to do INI reduction, to do lining and all these types of things. The problem is when you have very, very high groundwater levels for extended periods, you're going to get infiltration through the laterals, through a variety of sources. So really the first line of defense is let's go ahead and construct the plant so that we can manage it. And then we have more time to attack the others.
Sorry, just one more comment. And the question on the project, has there been increased filtration for the water that you guys are already reclaiming? Is that in here at all? Was that looked into?
I'm not exactly getting the question.
Oh, so like filtering the water, just in the reclaimed water that you guys are already, or that they would be getting in, is there any additional money being put into additional filters for non-peak times, just for your standard reclaimed water? Because aren't there different levels for reclaimed water?
There are. This plant is an AWT plant, so it will meet 5531.
Okay.
The filters that they have, the current sand filters, are being completely mechanically replaced.
Okay.
In lieu of sand filter, we have high-rate cloth filters that are going in, and instead of having a peak capacity of, say, 10 or 12, we're raising that peak capacity to 18.
But it doesn't affect the normal capacity filtration?
During normal times, it will reduce the surface loading rate, so it will increase the efficiency.
Okay, thank you.
So where's I need a little science behind this. Your flow increases with lateral lines just like sewer increase with storm events, correct? And how is that diverted towards you as opposed to going into sewage? I don't know that connection.
Anything in the collection system is coming to the wastewater plant.
Okay.
During the 2017 events, the tides were extremely high, and we were getting more flow for extended periods, and so we were forced to divert to various outfall mechanisms. We have 2 outfalls to the lagoon. If we are better able to treat the water and handle the water, we can manage it better with the ASR well. We can manage it better through a variety of sources. Also, once you get to a certain point, the plant is currently designed to pass a hydraulic peak of 12. Once you get beyond that, you can top the walls, you can get outside of the transfer basin can overflow, and you can get actually a discharge from the plant into surface waters, because we're surrounded on all 3 sides by the lagoon. So these additional hydraulic improvements and electrical improvements will allow us to avoid having potential overflows.
Do you understand what he's saying? Okay, so what he's saying basically, Danielle, is that when you have a storm event and the water is coming in so fast and so hard, if you don't have a way to take that water and get it to the plant, it's going to overflow and you're going to end up with it in the lagoon. If you can move the water faster and have a capacity to take it to the plant and get it there and do something with it, you're going to prevent that from happening. And that's what he's doing. He's designed a system that is going to allow the water to get to the plant rather than overflowing and getting into the lagoon. That's kind of is that right?
And on top of that, once you get it at the plant, you need to be able to manage it hydraulically through the piping systems, through the various networks of the plant, so that it doesn't overtop the walls and get it in the lagoon at that point too.
Because nobody is using reuse at that moment. So you have all this coming into the plant and nobody wants it.
Right.
So what do you do with it? So this is also re-permitting that ASR well to be able to.
Correct.
Thank you.
Let me do a crude economic analysis. This costs $113 a pound of nitrogen removed. We're being asked to pay about $30 on that. Anytime somebody comes forward and says $30 a pound, I don't care how big it is, we ought to jump on that like a hobo on a muffin. This is the lowest price I've seen for any project we have, and we ought to jump on that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. By the way, congratulations, you guys in that city have figured a way to capture a lot of rain, storm, and other water and keep it from going to the lagoon. And what we don't need, look, it's going to keep raining. We're going to keep having more of this kinds of weather. And this is preparation, now that you've collected it all, how to handle it without having to dump in and us having to sit here and listen to people talk about things floating in their canals. So, congratulations, great idea, $30 all over it. Move along.
Courtney.
I saw a filter in here, so I was under the impression it was treating. So I think it's a great project, don't get me wrong, but I'm struggling to figure out why the utility can't raise its rates to pay for that. I mean, like the other reclaimed water projects we have in here are all related to going above and beyond the permitted, nutrient removal. So is this going to do that?
It's going above and beyond the permitted. Right now, we have a permit from DEP. These improvements are, let's say, optional. These improvements are not being dictated by the DEP. So these improvements are indeed, increasing our peak capacity beyond 12 to 18.
Okay, so this is a lagoon-related...
This is a direct project that will keep us from discharging more into the lagoon.
Okay, and that's the purpose of it?
That is correct.
Okay,
And
I can handle that.
That was my question on if we've done one of these before, because if not, if it's not the first one, there may be other entities that want to come forward. But if it's a good project, then I think that we should encourage it. Which don't take our questions anything other than us
Well, I
being
just want to make sure
inquisitive
we're-
and being the first time.
We're differentiating between maintenance and going above and beyond.
I agree.
And that's my concern, is I don't want us to divert money that, we need for other projects to take care of maintenance issues for utilities. So if it's going above and beyond and it's reducing the impact to the lagoon, and it's exceeding the permit requirements, I can see that.
It's a sewer plant upgrade.
Correct.
Yes, it's going to directly and indirectly reduce the pollutants flowing into the lagoon, but how is this any different from any of the other wastewater treatment plants that have had the I&I problem with the rainfall events? Are we not?
I guess the primary difference is we've got to do some things anyways. So as long as we're in there spending money and as long as we're in there making improvements, by spending a little more money and by increasing the ability of the plant to handle these flows, we can do a lot more with the money available. So the time to do it is now.
This is increasing the flow handling. It's not necessarily increasing the filtering. Is that correct?
We could just essentially replace what we have. We've got current sand filters. We could go back in, put in new sand filters. It makes more sense to go with a better process, newer technology, more expensive, that can handle a much higher hydraulic peak. We're in there.
Isn't that true of, the South Beach wastewater treatment facility that was supposed to handle 6 million a day was getting hit with, 8 million or whatever the number when it was overflowing, right?
Yeah.
I don't understand how this is different. Yes, I understand that you're going to do some things. In increasing the capacity of the plant to handle the overflow conditions, you're going to add some things that further treat the, I'm just assuming, it sounds like you're arguing that you're going to further treat the effluent so it'll be cleaner coming out. But the main project seems to be to increase the capacity of the plant. And I'm with
I just
Courtney's
think it's
question.
important that we have a line, because, I can relate anything to helping the lagoon if you really ask me to. I can, I can, litter reduction, anything. We can figure out how to relate that. But I think we need to make sure that we really focus our funding sources on, if we have a lagoon tax to pay for things that we didn't have money for. And with the utilities, you have a funding source, which is your rates. And that's where my concern is when we start spending our funds on other sources, on other projects that could be funded somewhere else and have historically been funded somewhere else. That's my concern. Because that's a shift. That's just shifting.
But I think this is dealing with allowed discharges. This is treating and capturing allowed discharges. And the stuff in the river doesn't care where that pound of nitrogen comes from.
We're going beyond the permit, and that's maybe the line,
Well, no, I have felt the same way. This tax was not made to substitute for stuff that should have been done by others. Okay? It's a $5.5 million project. The above and beyond might only be the $1 million that they're asking us for. And that directly impacts the lagoon. So, they've already got all the water together. Now they're getting worried about a storm. That's the I&I problems and all that we understand. No, we shouldn't be paying for that part. But if they're going above and beyond, then I'm okay with throwing $1 million against their $5.
So that's our line, is above and beyond. And I think that's the discussion I think we just needed to have, and we all agree on that. And if that, I think it's a great project, and I applaud Cocoa Beach, because you guys are a utility that has always, done really well. How are you guys going to treat that PFAS that's sprinkling all over the place? Thought about that?
We're working on that.
But this is great, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm not supportive of it. I just want to make sure that we keep that, line.
Understood.
It's important because it's precedent setting in a way, but I think we have to be very careful with it. It's a different, it's over and above, that we can use that as our ground rule, our measuring stick. So when other projects like this, if they come up, then we can say, what we'll fund and what we won't fund.
Yeah, I think we're ahead of the regulators on this. The regulations have some reality baked into them. You could set any limit you want, but if the technology and the infrastructure and the funding and so on isn't there, this is going beyond regulations, and I think it's an innovative way to deal with discharges into the river, nutrients into the river, that is allowed and permitted and absolutely okay with DEP and everybody else, but nonetheless is putting stuff in. I think it's very, very innovative. We should perhaps be looking for this from other utility districts.
And to Charles's point, maybe, and to Courtney's, maybe we have something that accompanies this project or in the plan that says one of the reasons we are funding this is because it's going above and beyond, and again, to encourage others to go above and beyond. But that way, if people are just flipping through and they go, oh, we've got a reclamation, let's enter a project next year, but not go above and beyond, then that way they're seeing the actual reason. And for those that replace us all in 4 or 6 years, they'll know why we did what we did.
Yeah, just to support that, I mean, the regs are based on history too. And in water, we know that the next 20 years don't look as much like the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
With the enhanced hydrologic cycle, I mean, I think the figure was for every 1 degree Fahrenheit increase, there is a 6-inch increase in the hydrologic cycle. So, I mean, we're looking at potentially very large increases in flow, so.
Well, we certainly saw it in 2017, so.
Thank you.
Virginia?
Thank you.
Sorry, to John Durkee's questions. Would it help you for staff to get an accounting from the city of which components of this project are the above and beyond? What are the costs associated with the above and beyond components of the project, and make sure that those don't exceed the dollar amount?
We're 30 bucks. I mean, they're going to have to do lots, maybe going forward. But right now, I don't care if it's 10 times as much at $300, we're still good.
But I do think, again, when there's a project that's kind of new, to help us so we don't beat up the speaker, if we had some more particulars, that might help us wrap our head around it ahead of time, so we're not throwing all these questions on you at the floor.
That's right. And we can still get you that as well.
Thank you.
All right. Are we ready to move on? Yes. Okay, Osprey Basin.
This is lateral line. We are going to fund it under monitoring, not under removal, so there is no nitrogen reduction from simply smoke testing. Hopefully everyone agrees to that. And unfortunately, in the first 12,000 properties that we tested, and we found 30 that had broken lateral lines, which may or may not be as bad as a septic tank, we still haven't fixed them. We found 30 broken ones and due to some incredibly cumbersome bureaucratic system that Virginia has the patience to put up with, and I don't. We still haven't fixed them. When mine broke, the old 3-inch pipe, it took a week, because I was a cheapskate and tried to dig it out myself. Once I hired the plumbers, it took 2 days. We got the county, somebody spent $400,000 almost to find 30 broken lines 3 months ago, and they're still broken. Now, this testing, which I know the group approved for City of Titusville, should be done by the City of Titusville. Okay, or their utility department. I don't really see, this is where I'm back with you on this one, Courtney. This is something that's maintenance. This is something that cities and utilities standard do. But now we're going to spend $200,000 There's zero nitrogen reduction because it's just a test. There might be an impact on I&I. I'll accept there probably will be because they're going to find those $10 pop-off caps and some manhole things. But then we're going to have to spend money on the 10 broken lines that we find because 99.9995% are going to all be okay. So I'm opposed to it, but I know that this group agreed to put $800,000 into it. I've said my piece. Thank you.
I want to say two things. First off, I think, so running a test is going to give us results. It's going to give us information. And I think you can relate that information to an education. So those people that did have, or did see smoke coming through, or pipes going through, or cleanouts, or manholes that were uncovered or loose, that information, it can lead to change, which can lead to saving nitrogen. I'm not saying exactly, but I think that there is value in running tests and getting information. The other thing, this right here is, oh, I'm saved by the buzzer or something. No. In this, will that let them know if the manholes, if everything in the system, Virginia, do we know? Is this the exact same setup that we did in Satellite Beach?
And elsewhere, yes.
And Cocoa Beach, elsewhere?
Yeah.
Yes. They're just doing it throughout Titusville proper?
Well, the 4,000 properties.
The 4,000 properties.
I think it would be really wonderful to have a study to compare it to that further inland so that we can see the water saturation compared to beachside, which was one of the things that was clearly identified to us as possibly not being as accurate.
That was on the first 4,000. The next 8,000 we tested, that was not an issue. And they found the same percentage results of lateral lines. Look, I agree this needs to be done. No question this helps on the I&I issue, which does during storms impact the lagoon. But we're going to spend $200,000 to test. We're going to find maybe 10 lateral lines. And 3 months later, we haven't even fixed the 30 that we found.
But we may also find 1,000 of them. It's a different place. Last meeting, there was at least some head nodding that perhaps this is a code and code enforcement issue. And I think the results of these tests, as publicized, will help the city and the city commission, city councils pushing the code changes and say this is the reason we need to do it. This ain't theoretical. This is because there's smoke coming out of the ground.
I just think it's a very small price to pay to get people to start thinking about their own private sewer lines. And this is really focusing on the private sewer section, of the systems, and getting people to to think about that. And it's just part of that, process of educating the public, number one. And number two, I think when we talked at the last meeting, Todd, who's unfortunately not here today, brought up the point that, we should try to get them, as part of the agreement, to agree to regular testing in the future. And I don't know if that is something we want to make, if we do approve the project, a part of that agreement, as a group, kind of recommend that to make sure that, that smoke testing or regular line testing is part of the, utilities maintenance plan in the future. And I don't know if that's something that you all want to do, but that was discussed, and I just wanted to bring that up. But I am supportive of it, because I think it's important that, when we talk about the overflows and the I&I, that the private homeowners understand that they're part of that system too, and that they're part of that. Their clean-out caps are part of it, their laterals are part of it, and that those things need to be maintained as well. So that's why I think this is important, is that we are bringing in the private homeowners and the private properties into, the discussion of maintaining the overall sewer system.
During Virginia, maybe you can remember, because I can't, during that storm situation, Irma, that overflowed 4 or 5 million gallons a day into the lagoon. As a percentage of nitrogen and nutrients in the lagoon that year, it was like, what, 1%?
Less.
Yeah. Less than 1% came from that storm-related stuff.
A
tenth of 1%. So we're focusing on a 3-inch or 4-inch orange peel, whatever you call that, line from somebody's home, I agree educationally it makes sense. I don't see $200,000 or $800,000 that we've in the budget, or $20,000 a piece to fix these things. I mean, I think we got off track somewhere. This is the only opportunity I have to say it, so I'm going to say it.
I mean, I'll just respond. Like, when we're going through those discharges, unfortunately, we know that the nutrients added to Lagoon during that time is very small comparatively speaking, to the rest of the loading sources. We know that. The community doesn't know that. And the community sees something that somebody else is doing besides themselves and immediately jumps all over that. And that, I can't tell you how many phone calls I got during that time. And it wasn't that they were calling because, you know, hey, we don't want you to do anything about it because we know it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. That's not what they were saying. They were saying, you know, you're the worst government in the world, you're ruining our lagoon, and so, you know, unless you bring the public into the discussion, they don't know any of this. So $200,000 is like a little tiny drop in the bucket, just like the tiny little sewer nutrients are when we're looking at the discharges. So to me, I think it's just a small price to pay to get them involved into the whole discussion.
Yeah, just to add,
Point of order. I would suggest, to unless somebody has an amendment to remove this from the list, that we move on.
Well, I want to clarify one thing, because it does say here that it's going to be removal of nitrogen with this project. So if that isn't correct, then, you know, that needs to be modified. But I presume if they put it in there, they did have plans to correct the
That's a
lines.
second budget item. This $200,000 does not include any repair or replacement.
It includes caps, replacement caps.
That's an I&I issue. Actual nitrogen reduction would be out of a broken lateral at that time, unless we have a storm.
And then we move on.
Okay.
go ahead, you're fine.
All right. Cocoa Beach muck dredging. All right, seeing none, Brevard to Banana River Plant Project.
I did have a question on this. I think it's great. I know we had presentations on plants and seagrass. I didn't know if any thought was put into, because there was a question raised about, and I know everybody says there's too many manatees in the Indian River Lagoon, but making sure that the grass, and I'm just wondering if there's any thought put into making sure that the grass is planted, is protected from being harvested on, or if that's something that is even a concern.
I don't think they're talking about seagrass.
Different kind of plant.
I think they're talking about grass up on the shorelines like they use
Yes.
Spartina grass.
Okay, so this is not,
Mangroves and spartina.
so this is upland shoreline, not actually in
This
the
is to
water.
protect from erosion planting, so to speak. All right,
I had
yes.
a question about this and several others where the amount of money being requested is very small. And it seems like it's an awful lot of effort and management time that's involved for anywhere from tens of dollars to a few thousand. And I thought we had discussed maybe a year, like 5,000 as the limit, something like that. And I would suggest that maybe Virginia could have the freedom below $5,000 to do this out of her office if she wants to, or I don't know if she wants to even bother with, managing the small projects.
Yeah, this is under $4,000. The two together. We decided that 2 years ago not to even mess with these.
I think the discussion says that it was okay that they approved it, but that we would like to know what it was after. I think something like that? Is that what it was? No?
It cost us too much to administer it.
It was discussed, and I argued to let's see what the applicants do. If it's worth it to them to go through this process to get those dollars, then it's probably worth it to staff to process the paperwork to make the projects happen.
$720.
So, that one in particular, we would ask the zoo if we could consolidate that with their other requests, and there would be one contract for, multiple rows here, so it wouldn't be.
And there are also, that one's in Cocoa, and there were also areas that I know when the zoo originally looked at it, that they were going to be doing, but they weren't at the point where they could do it because, that whole waterfront is being. Yeah.
And
So
now,
next year, the rest of that's.
I will mention, too, that the National Estuary Program this year started a small grants program for under $5,000, and people in the public that are interested in doing small projects, they should probably look into pursuing those grants.
And the TDC, there may be applicable.
Same there.
So the one project that withdrew, they withdrew because the dollar amount was small enough that the paperwork wasn't worth it to them.
But you've essentially got 5 projects that are all being done by the Brevard
Yeah, but they're
Zoo.
different.
I realize that. However, it's one entity that we can manage as one entity, even though there are multiple projects. So I see that as a little bit different than a single entity coming in and wanting to do a project for $720. That is different.
Yeah, you make sense.
We need a category on those projects to lump together all these things.
All right.
No.
So that brings us to the Brevard Zoo Banana River Oyster Project.
Can I bunch together 105, 106, and 107?
Yes, all 3 of those.
So the voters approved a plan 2 years ago, and at the end, and it's all targets, and at the end of year 1, which is right now, the target said that there would be 2 linear miles of oyster reefs, 10,560 feet, or under our new square footage formula, about 60,000 square feet. I am not blaming the zoo. Okay, let me be clear. I got oysters. I'm growing them this is my 3rd year of being an oyster farmer, father, whatever it is, gardener. And the projects that have been done, particularly since the zoo took over, have all been successful and thrived. They came to us last year with a goofy idea, in my view. We approved it, but they didn't do it because the county commission apparently changed the writings in the final contract. They've been successful. Here's where we're at. If anybody in the county wants to know, at the end of year 1, our goal was 10,500 feet, and we are at 420 feet. Less than 4%. Now, I came out of the private world. When we did startups and we had venture funding, they gave us goals. And when you achieved a target or a goal, additional funding came. We approved over $1 million in projects right here on the zoo for oyster stuff. It's not their fault that Harbor Branch can't make enough spat, okay? It's not their fault that the state of Florida wants to know if oysters actually lived here or somebody can't get them a permit in time. I'm not blaming the zoo, but the simple fact is they're asking for another $1 million for a project that they're only 4% complete on. So I think that the zoo should come back to us next year and go, hey, we actually got something done, now give us more money. And unlike all the other projects, almost every other project, where we reimburse these cities after they put the money out and they're successful, that's not exactly how we're doing it with the zoo. So I support the zoo. I support the oyster project. I don't think we should budget another $1 million until they actually are able to accomplish something.
The zoo here.
Is Keith here?
Yeah.
Come on.
Come on.
So thank you, first of all. I wish I could tell you everything was as thriving, as enthusiastically as you say. We still feel like we haven't cracked the code. The problem, John, as I see it, is we've got these long permitting leads.
And if you cut it off, it will just be another year or two till we can put it in. It'll push it out 5 years more. So these are long lead projects. That's the nature of the beast. What we've been seeing is the small projects that we have completed, the permitting processes are in place and we can move relatively quickly. Nobody knows how to permit in the state of Florida 2 miles of shoreline restoration. And I'm not kidding you. We sat down with all the permitting agencies last year and they almost ran screaming from the room because it's just it's new. So the problem is, it's long lead times. We would love to be moving ahead with these projects, but the lead times on the permit is so long. So if they're not approved, we can't enter into the process. We don't actually bill the county for anything until expenses come. But if we don't actually start now, then it just pushes it back years and years and years. So we share your frustration. In this past year, we finished a 2017 project. We got one 2018 project. We were keyed up to do another one. But the big ones are sitting there while the permitting agencies still figure out what to do with restoration at this size. So we do absolutely share your frustration. We like the results we're seeing, but by no means do I want to qualify that we have cracked the code on this, because that's overly enthusiastic. But this is what we're seeing. So there's a lead time issue that we don't know how to get around other than to put it in so we can at least start the process, talk to the permitting agencies, and be in a position to figure it out.
You said crack the code a couple of times. You talked about the permitting problem. Is that the code you're talking about, or is it getting oysters to survive in the lagoon?
It's two things. Permitting is number one. It's actually oyster growth that is most concerning. We're not having problems having them survive, but these are subtidal reefs. So when you see those beautiful pictures in the Chesapeake of oysters sitting up, those are intertidal reefs. The reefs, what happens is the tide goes up and down, and you see this beautiful bridging. What we're seeing on our reefs is there's growth and there's recruitment, but it's not at the rate we'd like to see. So on both sides of the equation, we're also we still need to get more things in the water. We have talked to some of the oyster gardeners, and I appreciate you refer to the fact that people say, that there weren't oysters here. We talked to the commercial oyster fishermen who used to grow leases here, and they're very particular about where they put their oysters, so there was enough nutrient flow by the oysters, and you saw that great growth. Right now, we're terribly limited on where we can put oysters. It has to be within 30 feet of the shoreline?
Right now, 10.
10 feet of the shoreline. Well, that's not necessarily where you have the most nutrients flowing by to build the reef. So that's the second part of the equation, but the two are related, because the permitting is what sets the condition of where we can put the oysters and find out what's really effective. So the two things are going hand in hand, and the lead time, believe me, the zoo's reputation in this community is about getting things done. We don't like delays. But until we get this process, these ones approved, we're not really in a position to pursue them. So I think that's something obviously for all of you to consider. I don't know how it locks up your funds in the meantime, but I think you said earlier you haven't been using the funds at the rate you like. So as a citizen, I would say not a terribly heavy investment to start the process going forward.
Not only that, but if it doesn't happen, we get the money back. I mean, there's an agreement,
Well, is that...
It is the nature of innovation and R&D that you're into areas that somebody hasn't been before. I think that if you're running into barriers, you can either figure out how to get around them, or you can arrive at the point where you say no is a valid answer. But this is a very wise investment on that fourth thing we're supposed to do, which is figure out, in addition to everything we know how to do something we don't know how to do. This small bucks, potentially large payoff, and we are fulfilling our mandate to poke around in technology and science and see what we can make happen.
Keith, are we having to put any money out during this process?
No. The last two contracts we executed, we submitted for reimbursement at the end of the project once the reefs were already in the water. Going forward, if there is project costs, which we haven't done this yet, but it's written into the contracts that we've had in the past that we could reimburse as stages become complete.
That's fine.
And those stages may not be oysters in the water. That's the last stage. But the contract's written in a way to where if the oysters don't go in the water, all the money is repaid.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I want you to be successful. I don't want to sit here in 2 years and go, we promised the community 4 miles of oysters, I'm going out there tomorrow morning cleaning mine. Would you get them to grow, please? Okay. As long as we're not putting money out for lack of success.
And the other thing, I was chuckling as you talked about some of these plant micro projects. Some of these projects come because we have people calling us daily saying, please use our waterfront. We have private landowners going, can I just circumvent the whole process and just give you dollars at times? So the hunger is absolutely there. I agree with you 100%. People want to see this going in. They know intuitively it's going to contribute down the road, and it just makes them feel like they're doing something. So we believe in it, but we haven't solved it at this point. So.
All right.
Thank you.
Is it time to call the question?
We do have one other card that came in after we started the process. Matt Fleming.
I think he left, actually.
Okay. Well, all right. Yes, I think, hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, great discussion. Thank you. That brings us to general public comment, and I do have Gail Meredith.
I'm Gail Meredith from the Brevard Indian River Lagoon Coalition Board. I just wanted you all to be aware of this brochure, this little brochure that we did on what you can do to help the lagoon. We've kept hearing people go to lectures and things, and they leave at our own facilities, our partners' facilities, and they leave and they still don't know what to do. And so we just put together this quick information sheet and tried to touch all the bases. Linda Brandt from Brandt Bronet did it for us pro bono quickly. We just did it. We turned it around in 9 days for the Orb Festival. We wanted to have it for our table, but anybody can get quantities of this. So just let us know with our contact information, or call me, or on Facebook message me. And this morning Courtney said that Satellite Beach would be willing to pay for a reprint, and the Sierra Club is also willing to do that. So we're sort of maximizing our partner relationships, and everyone's, as you know, we're a volunteer organization, and everyone's doing it for free. So thank you all. Please get it out there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. That brings us to final comments by chair and committee members.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I'd like to basically read a statement. It would be unfortunate if either the work of this committee or its membership were to become a matter of polarized discussion. We've managed to avoid politics and keep our focus on fixing the lagoon. I feel that continuing on this path is essential to the credibility of the committee, and in turn that this committee's credibility is vital to the future of the river. Therefore, I am no longer a volunteer to serve another 2-year term on this committee. It's been an honor to work with all of you, and I wish you continued good success. And since I'm going to be catching bonefish at our next meeting, the last one I could attend, he's in the box. So.
Thank you for everything you've done, John.
Yes.
We appreciate it.
Thanks for your leadership.
You did a great job.
We do. We expect you to continue to make suggestions on things that you see.
I just have one quick comment. I spoke to Virginia during the break, and I think what she's got recommended for the county commission on the overall plan and how we're going to, funnel funds towards projects with the reduce and remove, I think is perfectly good for my comments and looking at trying to get some more septic tanks done. So I think they've worked on that. So I think that's going really well. And I think if you look at the project distribution, we did a lot of reducing what we just approved too. So, but I do think that we need to, like Danielle said, get some education out there about the mux flux and that. I know we had a cool slide before. Didn't we have a slide that Dr. Treffy did? The
graphic of the arrows going up and coming back down to the mux.
If we could get that out, I'd be willing to share that on my city page and stuff like that. So, so that's the only thing I had. But I think you guys did a great job, and I think you really saw kind of the pattern that was going out in the community and responding to that. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And along the same lines of education, a lot of the projects that we approved, there was really no public engagement, stormwater in general, education with the baffle boxes and that sort of thing. And those assets are hidden. And of course, we talked about, when you can point to something, the average bear can, that makes sense. But we're doing so many projects that you can't really point to, and if we can develop some sort of iconic, some icon signs or something, so that there's, a public asset, a benefit here taking place, even though you don't see it, it's just a road now. Or it's just a grade.
Yes.
But
Your
we had
Lagoon
talked
tax
about doing
dollars
that
at
at some
work.
point.
And we do have some companies that are engaging as far as on the marketing side, so I know one of them reached out to me for information, and I encourage them to watch these meetings. So hopefully, Lorraine, your suggestions will make it back to the people that will then turn around and have something tangible on that suggestion.
Virginia?
Yeah, I'd just like to say my thanks to those members and alternates who do want to continue. Well, thanks to everybody for the 2 years already served. But I want to recognize those who are taking more punishment. So these are the reappointments that were recommended by the Space Coast League of Cities and approved by the County Commission. Courtney Barker, Stephanie Ely, John Windsor, Vinnie Taranto, and Charles Venuto. And then reappointments approved that were approved by the County Commission in 2016 and reapproved at their last meeting. Lorraine Koss, David Lane, Terry Casto, John Durkee, and Todd Swingle. So and then Danielle Bowden has been approved to move up from her alternate seat to the vacant member seat, and we are advertising for new recruits for the vacant seats, and so we'll be bringing those to the Space Coast League of Cities at their January meeting, and then bringing those appointment recommendations back to the County Commission in, I can't remember, late January or early February. So thank you to all of you for all you've done, and look forward to continuing to work with those of you continuing on.
Are the new recruits just considered from that particular category?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
For the specific fields of expertise that are being vacated, that's what we are advertising for. The advertisement posted last Sunday in Florida. We did a big display ad in last Sunday's paper and again this Thursday. And the deadline, do you remember what the deadline is for applications?
Was it the 17th or 18th?
I think, yes. I think it's within the next week or so. So if people are watching and are interested,
And the application is on the CFC website?
yeah, the application is posted on the Save Our New River Lagoon, your Citizen Oversight Committee website, or you can call our office at 633-2016, or email any of us.
And reappointment is 2 years.
Yes.
How many positions are open now?
3.
3? Okay. And whose positions were those?
Well, Jean Artusa,
Okay,
which
got that.
Danielle's moving up into, so that vacates her seat. And then John Byron is not seeking reappointment. Karen McLaughlin is not seeking reappointment.
Okay.
And who did I miss? John Durkee, I'm sorry. Yes.
So that's 4. 4 positions?
4.
The fourth today.
Three and one. Three
Fourth
for the
today.
League of Cities and one.
Oh, I see, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
The county only has one.
The county has 1, the league has 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Since this is the last time I'll be sitting here, but I hope to find myself out there quite often.
Oh, we'll be harassed.
And you'll be harassed. I'd like to thank all of my fellow folks on this committee. I've certainly learned a whole lot of different experience and education and perspective, and it's been very useful. It's a great group who all work really hard. Whether it looks like it or not, we work really hard to make this thing together. I'd certainly like to thank Virginia and her team. Man, they answer emails immediately. They put up with me. They answer in detail. Great. The unsung heroes of this project is staff. And I think everybody in the audience, we need to applaud. Some people just come once, and some people come all the time. We need to keep the pressure on the elected officials. We need to keep the pressure on us, on Virginia's staff. I'm discouraged at times because it's going to take forever and stuff takes a long time to get done. I'm learning in the government, and I'm encouraged that we are making progress on the lagoon. So thank you for the opportunity.
And just to clarify, you're not off the hook yet, because terms go through February. We want to keep all of you until we've approved the new plan update, so we're not having brand-new members looking at a brand-new plan. Right. So that's why it's timed with a February transition instead
no chaos?
Yeah, calendar years.
I just want to let you guys know that I attempted to not renew my appointment.
Yes.
There was some arm twisting.
And Jean Artusa beat me to it. So I'm hanging on until the real estate is spoken for well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You've added a lot.
I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, and thank you all for your service, and we'll see you in the new year. Thank you, Virginia, for everything. And we finished on time.
Yes, great job.
Yeah.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.